Chapter 1189. My name is Su Zhu, and my nickname is the Little Reincarnated Expert. I don't refute this because this is the truth. Because the old ancestor is quite amazing and has become a half-step saint. The Su family has risen, and I have also benefited from it. Second-generation cultivator. That's what outsiders call me. But it's quite appropriate. Of course, it doesn't really matter whether it's appropriate or not. What I want to say is that as a reincarnated expert, I have seen all sorts of grand scenes since I was young. For example, for cultivation treasures, even if ordinary cultivators fought to the death and begged everywhere, they still might not be able to obtain a few. But I am different. From the moment I stepped onto the path of cultivation, I had whatever I wanted. It might be a bit exaggerated to use one and throw one away, but I have enough. There's nothing I could do about it. My strength doesn't allow me to be low-key. But today I, Su Zhu, feel that my previous understanding was too narrow. It turns out that there is such a fierce place in this world where treasures aren't counted by number, but by piles and pieces. It's fine if the quality is average, but the key is that they're all good things. How good are they? With my background, I don't even have time to wipe my saliva. Mine, it's all mine. Whoever dares to compete with me, I will kill them. The people who competed had arrived. As the Thunder Dominion cultivator had said, if they could come here, so could others. Previously, Ruanjing and Su Zhu didn't know what the Thunder Dominion cultivator and High Sky Dominion cultivator had obtained. Their eyes were filled with jealousy, and they were unwilling to give up, so they almost attacked them. Thinking about it, if the cultivators who came later saw the three people wantonly collecting treasures in the front yard, what would their reaction be? They would likely have the heart to skin them alive. With the arrival of the other cultivators, there was no room for discussion, and a chaotic battle immediately erupted. At the start, Su Zhu, Ruanjing, and the Thunder Dominion cultivator tried to join forces to kill the newcomers, but they soon gave up on this idea. This was because 7 passages in the fog had opened in a short period of time, and a large number of cultivators had begun to break into the house. Seeing his treasures being taken away by others, Su Zhu's eyes turned red. But he wasn't stupid enough to recklessly fight with his life on the line. When Ruanjing was the first to turn around and leave, no longer trying to stop them, Su Zhu gritted his teeth and quickly left. But in next to no time, the vexation, hatred, and helplessness in his heart completely vanished. Su Zhu, who felt like he had been refreshed, had to admit that he was really a frog in a well. They were all treasures. All treasures. It wasn't just limited to the front yard. Throughout the entire mansion, he couldn't see a single empty spot. At this moment, even his liver was trembling. Su Zhu's eyes were red, and his body was trembling like he was having a stroke. There was only one thought in his mind. I'm rich. I'm completely rich. In fact, he wasn't the only one. All the cultivators who entered the house were probably thinking the same thing. The chaotic battle soon came to an end. Treasures were everywhere, and everyone was busy picking and collecting them. Who would be in a mood to fight? Even if he killed his opponent, so what? If he had the time, he might as well collect more treasures. Not to mention, fighting was risky. A moment of carelessness could cause one to lose oneself. Everyone wanted to be the Oriole. No one wanted to be the pitiful cicada that was about to be eaten. The fog and the bamboo forest tumbled about. Channel after channel formed, sending cultivators here. More and more cultivators gathered in the mansion. Although this place was filled with treasures, no one would despise them. They had taken more. As the number of cultivators continued to increase, although it was still stable on the surface, everyone had turned into pickers. But it was like a bamboo basket covering a stove. Unbeknownst to him, a flame had suddenly sprung out of it with a whoosh. Everyone was sucked in. They tumbled and struggled in the raging flames, like a living hell. Qin Yu sighed. He stared at the lump of iron in his hand, a bitter smile on his face. He wasn't someone who would easily give up, but more and more cultivators were arriving in the mansion. In this relatively barren courtyard, 4 or 5 groups of cultivators had arrived. Although Qin Yu and Ruanjing hadn't been discovered yet, it was better to be cautious. Qin Yu flipped his hand and put away the lump of iron. He decided to stop pouring magic power into it. Once he left this place, he would have plenty of time. He took a deep breath and calmed down the gloomy and unwillingness in his heart. His eyes flashed, and he revealed a thoughtful look. Now, there were enough cultivators in the courtyard. If they took the treasures here, they would naturally trigger the strength of the contract. Before, there weren't many, so there might not have been any reaction. But now, there should be some changes. Outside the mansion, the fog in the bamboo forest quietly began to spread. It first surrounded the entire mansion and then crossed over the walls. Then, bit by bit, it completely submerged the mansion. The fog was poisonous. Qin had already personally experienced this. As long as there were fluctuations of life, they would be attacked by the poison. The fog's poison targeted a cultivator's soul. After coming into contact with it, it would constantly corrode. This startled the cultivators in the mansion, who were busy collecting treasures. But they soon discovered that although the fog's poison was fierce, they didn't need to fear it. This was because they had more than enough treasures in their hands. And what was good was that most of these treasures could help cultivators resist the poison in the fog. Then things were simple. Of course, it wasn't that no one doubted the purpose of the fog. But in the current situation, they didn't have any other choice. The fog was here. It was poisonous, and the poison was fierce. Moreover, it targeted the soul. After coming into contact with it, it would be troublesome. The antidote was in their hands. If they ate it, there might be a problem, but if they didn't, they would die. Was there even a need to choose? Qin had waited for so long. This was the change he expected, but his mood wasn't good. Although he was the first to arrive here and had seen this mansion filled with treasures, he didn't dare to touch a single thing. This also led to the poisonous fog spreading out and invading the wooden hut, covering him and Master Yun. He could only forcefully resist it. As was said before, if it was just Qin Yu alone, then the poison wouldn't affect him too much. But Master Yun couldn't. If Qin Yu wanted her to continue living, he could only choose to bear the burden for her. If he didn't choose, then Master Yun would soon die. So, this was the life of a lion egg. Although it seemed as if there were many choices, the truth was that there was only a single path, and the one he didn't want to walk the most. He tried calling out to the little blue lamp, but there was no response at all. This left Qin Yu secretly cold. If the fog was hidden so well, then this meant that the realm within the realm he was in was likely being watched. And the master of these eyes must be extremely strong, so strong that even the little blue lamp had to completely restrain its aura. As he thought about the many young powerhouses that had broken into the land of chaos, such as Heavenly Sword Sect's Ling Xiao, Xiangzhang Academy's Ruan Jing, and so on, there was definitely some inside story. Thus, this situation wasn't difficult to understand. But understanding was one thing. Without the little blue lamp's help, things would become a bit troublesome. The poison in the fog, after touching the soul, would produce a corrosive effect. It was similar to a corrosive effect. The good thing was that every time a certain amount of the soul was corroded, an equal amount of poison would be consumed. The bad thing was that this fog was endless. Unless one escaped from it, the poison would continue to invade their body without end. Qin Yu could use the strength of his soul to help Master Yun consume the poison. But soul strength was different from magic power. Without the help of external objects, the recovery speed would be relatively slow. In the current situation, no one knew how long the poisonous fog would last. Qin Yu couldn't take the risk of weakening himself. Then there was only one choice. Qin Yu reached out a hand and placed it on Master Yun's body. A pure soul strength instantly poured into her body. At the same time, the pitiful wails of the old turtle echoed in his mind. "Master, please take pity on me. I am too weak. I cannot withstand such extraction." The corners of his lips twitched. No matter how he thought about it, this fellow's words didn't sound right. Forget it. In consideration of his efforts, Qin Yu wouldn't bother arguing with him. The old turtle was weak, but a conservative estimate was that he could maintain this weakened state for several dozen more years. Thus, drawing out a bit of his soul strength wasn't too much of a problem. After temporarily solving Master Yun's problem, Qin Yu looked at the floating fog in front of him a sharp light flashing in his eyes. First, there was a massive amount of treasures, and then there was this poisonous fog. If she didn't want to die, she could only obediently use the treasures to save her life. If Chinyu said there wasn't a problem here, he would have to pluck out his own head. Looking at this pace, there were definitely more tricks to be played. He would just have to wait and see. Chinyu hadn't even seen what tricks the master of this residence had up his sleeves. But the cultivators that broke into the residence were already starting to have problems. The reason was simple. No matter how many treasures there were in the residence, they couldn't withstand the wanton plundering of so many cultivators. At the start, everyone was busy harvesting. Even if there were some conflicts, they would just coldly laugh and let it go. But as time passed and the number of treasures decreased, more and more conflicts occurred. Gradually, anger began to grow within them. Of course, there was also a potentially important factor: the fog that covered the residence. The fog was poisonous and could damage the soul. One needed to refine and absorb treasures in order to resist it. No one knew how long they would be trapped here. Even though everyone had an abundant amount of treasures in their hands, this didn't affect their hopes of obtaining more. In particular, the cultivators that entered the residence. Although their cultivations weren't too bad, there were still differences in strength. The weak were fine, but the strong would still have some thoughts. An ordinary and nameless green grass had caused the first murder in the residence. The specific process wasn't important. What was important was that, as one side died, horror descended upon them. The dead cultivator's body turned to powder. A crimson bead the size of a dragon's eye appeared in front of everyone. No one knew what this blood bead was. At the start, even though they were surprised, they didn't pay much attention to it. This was because as the cultivator turned to powder, his storage magic tool was also destroyed and all sorts of things exploded on the ground. Of course, this included all the things he had collected after entering the house. In a chaotic battle, the blood bead was taken away by someone during this process. The matter of someone dying didn't cause anyone to panic. In the dangerous world of cultivators, this was a normal occurrence to begin with. But after this day, within the courtyard that was covered by the poisonous fog, people began to constantly die. The number increased, and a terrifying shadow covered everyone's hearts, because things began to become strange. Chapter 1190. In the beginning, there were reasons for people to die. For example, two parties were fighting over a treasure. There was already hatred between them. But gradually, a change occurred. There was no longer a need for a reason to kill. In fact, it could even be used to deliberately kill other cultivators. And it just so happened that at this time, the fog that covered the courtyard changed again. The poison was still the same poison, but for some reason, it gradually gained the ability to block divine sense and conceal one's aura. This undoubtedly provided the murderer with a more convenient condition. Thus, the number of cultivators who died increased rapidly in a short period of time. There was no love or hate without reason in this world. In this place, there was no reason to kill without reason. There must be a problem here. The courtyard was only so big. No matter how cautious the murderer was, with the cover of the fog, there would eventually be a time when they would be exposed. Especially as the massacre continued, the number of cultivators decreased greatly. The remaining people became even more cautious and joined forces to protect themselves. Thus, after a fishing, a group of fearful and uneasy cultivators finally discovered the secret hidden within the massacre. That's right, the secret was something that many people had seen with their own eyes. After a cultivator died, their body turned into powder and condensed into a blood bead. Everything in the world originally had no name. Later on, someone gave it a name. After it was called, it became their own name. Human bead was its name. After a cultivator died, their essence, energy, and divine blood were all stripped away and their body turned into powder. Only then could this blood bead be condensed. Calling a human bead was actually a very fitting name. It was so fitting that people couldn't help but feel a chill down their spine just by hearing it. But cultivators weren't ordinary people. To be more precise, they had cold, hard, and strong hearts, as well as a strong ability to accept things that far exceeded ordinary people. A horrifying origin didn't matter, as long as the human being was useful to them. And it just so happened that it was a very amazing treasure. After swallowing a human being, a cultivator's cultivation would rapidly increase in a short period of time. They could even break through the bottleneck of cultivation in one go. What was even more tempting was that, perhaps because the human being was the accumulation of a cultivator's everything, it could even increase a cultivator's potential. As mentioned before, there were countless living beings in the world. Even if one stepped onto the great Tao of cultivation, it didn't mean that everything would be smooth sailing. Even if one's luck was extremely good and they avoided all kinds of disasters, and they worked hard enough, when their potential reached its limit, even if they knew that there was still a great Tao in front of them, they could not take another step forward. To be able to raise one's cultivation by leaps and bounds, as well as raise the limits of one's potential, there was really no need for anything more than that. Just these 2 points were more than enough to drive anyone crazy. Therefore, after the murderer who was interrogated was executed, the ownership of the human pearl became quite unpleasant. Not long after, this group of cultivators, who had formed an alliance to protect themselves, completely collapsed due to a few internal killings. No one could be trusted, because to the cultivators in the courtyard, every living cultivator was a moving pearl. Even the closest of friends, cultivators from the same sect, or even lovers in love, none of them could guarantee that they wouldn't be stabbed in the back to end their lives. At this moment, the trust between people had completely vanished. All that was left was cold, killing intent and burning greed. The residents had now truly turned into a living hell. Chinyu didn't leave the wooden hut, but that didn't mean he didn't know what was happening outside. In particular, after the old turtle displayed what could be called perfect stealth talent, he was able to see everything clearly. Towards the slaughter happening outside, he was indifferent on the surface, but his heart was icy cold. To a cultivator, killing people wasn't anything at all. But this residence had turned a group of powerful, calm, and powerful cultivators into wild beasts that only knew how to kill. He had guessed that there would be a follow-up, but this follow-up was a bit too cruel. Of course, sighing was just sighing. Chinyu didn't change his original intentions because of this, nor did he have the impulse to become the savior of the world. Everyone here was a stranger, so if they died, then they died. If he thought it was cruel, then at most he would just close his eyes and watch for a little longer. It was impossible to save them. Chinyu wouldn't throw his life away just because of some so-called pity. When he was outside the mountain, in order to frighten everyone, Chinyu had already exposed his ability to grasp the space laws. And now there was the human bead. Although Chinyu guessed that the appearance of the human pearl was likely related to the contract that the old turtle mentioned, he didn't touch anything in the house. Even if he died, there was a high chance that the human pearl wouldn't change. But the others didn't know. In this current situation, once Chinyu appeared, he would immediately become the target of public criticism. It was second only to the great Tao of time, and even sages might not be able to completely grasp the space laws. Who wouldn't covet it? And now, the chance was right in front of him. Once he killed Chinyu and ate up the human pearl he formed, everything would be over. It's yours. Chinyu decided to be a completely cowardly tortoise. He hid himself well and waited for new changes to appear. Although he didn't know what the purpose of the owner of the house was, there was no point in killing people. He couldn't allow the cultivators in the house to kill each other endlessly. Thinking like this was correct, and Chinyu was indeed prepared to do so. He did not even want the treasure, so there was no way he would be interested in the mysterious human pearl. But sometimes, what you think and what you will face will never be able to match. The old tortoise saw burning wind. This descendant of the fire-bathing lineage might have had bad luck, but he was at the end of the order of the cultivators that entered the house. In other words, by the time he entered, the fog had already arrived, but he hadn't collected too many treasures. This was certainly a matter that left him unhappy. In particular, after he learned that the first cultivators to arrive had all obtained great harvests, his unhappiness rose to another level. But fortunately, the slaughter soon arrived. Burning Wind, who wanted to kill and steal treasures, was in fact the first group of people to discover the secret of the human pearl. Thus, by today, not only was he rich, but his cultivation had risen to an astonishing degree compared to when he entered the mystic realm. He had already clearly touched upon the threshold of the original God realm. If it weren't for condensing an even more powerful and perfect source of his own great Tao, he was confident he could break through in one go. Not too long ago, Burning Wind encountered a strange cultivator. He had no impression of this person, but he was extremely strong. He was so strong that even in his current state, Burning Wind could feel an intense, dangerous aura coming from this person. At the same time, there was a nearly unbearable temptation. That's right, temptation. This word wasn't wrong. Burning Wind encountered a man, but it had nothing to do with his sexual orientation. Instead, he felt the aura of the great Tao from this strange cultivator. His strong intuition constantly stirred Burning Wind's nerves. As long as he killed this person and swallowed the human pearl, he could condense a perfect source of the great Tao and become an original God Realm cultivator. Becoming an original God Realm cultivator wasn't a big deal, but a perfect source of the great Tao. Any God Realm cultivator couldn't bear this temptation. Therefore, although he knew it was risky, Burning Wind still decided to take action after a short hesitation. His original intention was to sneak attack. Even if he couldn't kill the enemy with one strike, he could at least give himself a slight advantage. However, whether it was a coincidence or something else, the strange cultivator seemed to have some thoughts about Burning Wind. Neither of them could sneak attack the other, and the battle broke out the moment they met. Both of them were very strong, so strong that they couldn't kill each other in a short time. Intentionally or unintentionally, they began to avoid other cultivators, moving to the corners of the house to avoid being taken advantage of. Then, they arrived at a small courtyard that few people visited. Behind it was an empty woodshed. Chinyu helplessly discovered that he was faced with a difficult choice. Burning Wind had delivered himself to his doorstep. Should he kill him or not? If he killed him, there was a chance he would be exposed. Even with Chinyu's shrewdness, he still felt his heart tremble just thinking about the consequences. But if he didn't kill him, with Teacher Yun's current condition, it was hard to say how long she could last. If she died, everything Chinyu had done before would be meaningless. He didn't hesitate for too long. He took a deep breath, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. Chinyu had entered the endless sea and rushed through the land of chaos to become famous, to obtain attention, and then to obtain a chance to enter the Peach Blossom Spring. His original plan was to run through the entire endless sea, but because of the old turtle, he had no choice but to make a last-minute change. Now, this plan was doomed to fail. If he wanted to accomplish his goal of becoming famous, then this realm within the endless sea was the best choice. In fact, Chinyu even suspected that the reason so many tyrannical cultivators had rushed into the endless sea's smelting trial was because of that formidable soul body in this realm within the realm within the realm. And Teacher Yun was most likely the key to suppressing it. It was similar to what he said before. It seemed as if there were many choices, but the truth was that there was only one path to take. It wasn't that he couldn't take another path, but he would need to give up some things, and these things were often very important. Burning Wind was fighting. He had guessed how strong his opponent was, but he discovered that he had still underestimated him. Very strong. This was the only label that Burning Wind could place on his opponent right now. He had already attacked with all his strength, and it seemed as if he had the upper hand on the surface. But for some unknown reason, he felt a sense of unease in his heart. Soon, Burning Wind found a reason why he felt uneasy. His opponent was very calm. Even though he was at a disadvantage and was nearly severely wounded by Burning Wind's fierce attacks, this strange cultivator's eyes were no different from before. They had changed far too much, as if everything was within his grasp. Startled, Burning Wind inwardly shivered. He wasn't afraid, but when he attacked, he subconsciously held back a bit of caution. Soon, what happened proved that Burning Wind's caution was correct. Bang! After a close combat, The strange cultivator suddenly looked up, a cold sneer at the corners of his lips. Then, he opened his mouth and spat out a breath. Strictly speaking, it was a gray gas. It was like a living creature, twisting at an astonishing speed. Without giving Burning Wind any time to react, it drilled into his body through the space between his eyebrows. The fire-bathing clan controlled the flames of the world. When they fought with their enemies, their bloodline boiled. Although there were no flames around their bodies, there was a blazing high-temperature barrier. This barrier was a formidable layer of defense. But now, in front of this gray gas, the high-temperature barrier was clearly useless. It was easily pierced through. Burning Wind's body suddenly froze, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Extreme cold erupted in that instant, and Burning Wind's heartbeat nearly stopped. Shock, anger, and shock appeared in his eyes. To be able to freeze a cultivator of the fire-bathing lineage who erupted with all his strength, this ice-cold strength could be called terrifying. The strange cultivator didn't hesitate. He took a step forward, raised a hand, and blasted towards Burning Wind's forehead. Take advantage of his weakness to take his life. Of course, he wouldn't make the same mistake that would only appear in a stupid plot. What nonsense! After he killed this person, he could say whatever he wanted. Puff! Flesh and blood disintegrated. Burning Wind's shining bald head broke into countless pieces. Red and white matter mixed together and splashed backwards. Then, the headless corpse fell backwards. The strange cultivator let out a breath, excitement in his eyes. As he stared at Burning Wind's headless corpse, his eyes became hot. Mutual attraction probably referred to the relationship between him and Flaming Wind. What Burning Wind felt before, the strange cultivator probably felt the same. Thus, these two people both wanted to kill the other and then swallow the human pearl formed after the other's death. Now, it seemed that he was a step ahead. He seized the opportunity to use his hidden card and kill Burning Wind on the spot. If it weren't for the extreme cold energy in his stomach that restrained the power of fire, wanting to kill this young powerhouse of the fire-bathing lineage wouldn't have been so simple. But luck was also a part of one's ability. He had killed his opponent. This was an indisputable fact. As long as he swallowed the human pearl, his strength would rise once more and he would have no opponent in the entire mystic realm. In fact, he might even be able to kill all the cultivators one by one and turn them into human pearls to swallow. There was also that Chinyu who had entered the mystic realm first and hadn't appeared yet. He was absolutely a must-kill option. The space laws, that was the legendary space laws. Just thinking about it made him drool. Coming to the land of chaos this time had been the right decision. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the burning heat in his heart. The strange cultivator licked his lips and subconsciously frowned. Something didn't seem right. Burning Wind had already died, so why hadn't he formed a human pearl? Was it because he was stronger, so the speed at which he formed the pearl was slower? Something was wrong. The strange cultivator's eyes widened. His reaction wasn't slow, but the terrifyingly high temperature had already erupted like a volcano. Bang! Crimson tongues of flame wrapped around him. No, impossible. The strange cultivator crazily struggled. You are already dead. Within the flames, Burning Wind's icy voice echoed out. My fire-bathing lineage has a supreme treasure that can bestow a flame substitute. It is the same as having another life. You killed me, but the flames are also me. The bald Burning Wind's face appeared in the flames, his eyes cold and callous. I have already answered your question. Now you can go on your way in peace. No, the strange cultivator screamed. But after falling into the flames, he had already lost the initiative. A moment later, with a light puff, the flames vanished from sight. A charred corpse fell to the ground, directly turning into powder. A crimson human pearl the size of an egg appeared in front of him. Flames condensed around his body. Burning Wind leaned against the door, his complexion pale. He gasped for breath, his eyes incomparably bright. He had won. He reached out and took the human pearl in his hand. However, right at this moment, Flaming Wind's figure suddenly stiffened. Kacha! there was the crisp sound of bones breaking. A terrifying dark aura instantly invaded his orifices and severed all his vitality. I heard that you have 2 lives. I wonder if you can come back to life this time. The truth was that he couldn't. Qin Yu looked down at the 2 incomparably crimson human pearls in his hand. Added together, they were the size of a goose egg. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Could this thing really not be eaten? Chapter 1191. Qin Yu had thought of countless ways to kill Burning Wind, but he never imagined that this would be the final result. Of course, when Burning Wind died, he definitely didn't think that he would be like an old hen whose neck was casually snapped by someone else. This could be said to be extremely sullen. But killing was killing. No matter what method was used, no matter how unbelievable the process was, wasn't the result the most important thing? Returning to the question above, the human bead couldn't be eaten. No matter how explosive its effects were, Qin Yu wouldn't touch it. But what about Teacher Yun? Before entering this courtyard, Qin Yu didn't know that Burning Wind would turn into a human bead the size of an egg after being killed. In other words, the method he asked the old turtle to save Teacher Yun could no longer be used. He had to make a difficult choice. If he fed Teacher Yun the human bead formed after Burning Wind's death, there was a chance he could save her, but there was also a chance he could push her into an unfathomably terrifying abyss. Qin Yu hesitated. When it concerned himself, he could kill without hesitation. But now, it concerned the life and death of others. But the development of events soon made it so that Qin Yu couldn't hesitate any longer. Teacher Yun's condition began to worsen. This didn't exceed Qin Yu's expectations. In fact, it was already good luck that she was able to forcefully extend her life to this point under the bloodline backlash. He could either watch her die or eat the human bead and gamble his life. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if there really was a problem, he could think of a solution later. Then, it all depends on your fate. Qin Yu pinched open her mouth and placed the human bead formed after Burning Wind's death into her mouth. Then, he lifted his chin and swallowed it. A moment later, his fingers moved twice. Teacher Yun slowly opened her eyes. Her gaze fell on Qin Yu, and after a brief moment of confusion, she said, "Big Brother Qin." Her voice was weak and hoarse. Qin Yu smiled. Disregarding everything else, at least Teacher Yun had come back to life. "Don't speak for now." He lifted a hand and carefully sensed her body. He determined that the bloodline backlash had subsided and she was in a state of constant strengthening. He relaxed a little. It seemed that Teacher Yun's luck wasn't bad. At least, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with her. "You're fine for now. If you feel any discomfort, you must tell me immediately." Qin Yu withdrew his hand and earnestly said. A look of gratitude surfaced on Yunshi's face. "Thank you, Brother Qin. If not for you, I would have been dead by now." Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. He said, "I won't hide it. The reason why I saved you was because I had my own considerations. If I offend you in any way, I hope you can forgive me." Yunshi widened his eyes in shock before nodding vigorously. "You are the one who saved my life." "Big Brother Qin, I will help you no matter what you do. What if it wants your life?" As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, he immediately suppressed it. Qin Yu said, "You just woke up and your body hasn't recovered yet. Take a rest." "Yes." Yunshi closed his eyes. Qin Yu sat down beside him, and the surroundings fell silent. Glancing at Master Yun, who seemed to have fallen asleep once more, Qin Yu suddenly remembered that he hadn't taken back the dark moon and crimson sun marks within her body. Forget it. It wouldn't be too late to take it back after she wakes up. Taking a deep breath, Qin Yu began to adjust his breathing. The dark moon and crimson sun no longer needed to provide him with strength. This was the same as undoing a shackle that had tightly bound his body. As long as he adjusted his breathing for a period of time, he would be able to restore himself to his peak condition. But not long after Qin Yu closed his eyes, a feeling of dread erupted from deep within his heart. His eyes flew open, beads of sweat covering his forehead. His eyes swept around like lightning. Everything was calm as it was in the beginning. There was only the sleeping Master Yun lying beside him, breathing evenly. That horrifying aura Qin you felt just now seemed to have been an illusion. His eyes darkened, and a dignified expression appeared on his face. But before he could think further, his complexion changed. He looked up. The fog obscured his vision, but after approaching a certain distance, he could still feel cultivators approaching. More than one. Qin Yu's first thought was that Burning Wind's battle with a strange cultivator had aroused the attention of other cultivators. But he soon discovered that this wasn't the case. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. With the sound of breaking air, several figures rushed into the courtyard. Their eyes all fell upon the tightly shut entrance to the wooden shed. Qin Yu's heart sank. They were coming for him. But why? When he killed Burning Wind, he had acted quickly and decisively. Even if he revealed a bit of his aura, it was impossible for others to sense it with the poisonous fog covering it. There was no time to think about this because someone had already attacked. It was Ruanjing. He lifted a hand and smashed the wooden shed's door apart. A calm voice sounded out. "Brother Qin, at this time, are you still not ready to come out?" Master Yun was startled awake. Her face paled. Qin Yu glanced at her, indicating that she didn't need to worry, even though he didn't have any confidence in himself. In terms of hidden cards, he didn't fear anyone outside, even if they had more or less eaten up some human beads. Facing the combined forces of so many people, his chances of victory were close to zero. Although this was the truth, after a brief moment of shock and anger, Qin Yu quickly calmed down. Panicking was useless. It would only speed up his own death. Moreover, he hadn't even fought yet, so it was unknown what the result would be. Since they had already come knocking on his door, continuing to hide was meaningless. Qin Yu gestured for Master Yun to lie on his back, and then opened the spell. Space trembled, and two figures appeared out of thin air. Ruanjing's eyes blazed with heat. He immediately smiled. "Brother Qin, we meet again." As he spoke, his eyes swept over Master Yun, and his pupils shrank. "This miss has actually woken up. Does that mean that hateful, baldy Burning Wind has already been killed by you?" Ruanjing already knew that Master Yun came from the fire-bathing lineage and needed to kill to save her life. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes at him. "That's right." The several people on the other side stirred. After swallowing up the human beads, Burning Wind's strength was in the top echelon within the residence. This was a publicly acknowledged fact. But now, he had actually died under Qin Yu's hands. Everyone naturally dreaded his strength. Ruanjing clapped her hands and laughed. "Brother Qin is really good at using this move of borrowing strength. But unfortunately, I just happened to sense a trace of aura belonging to the bathing fire lineage not long ago. If I'm not mistaken, Burning Wind was fighting with someone at that time." He suddenly stepped down. A strong wind blew past, dispersing the fog and revealing two sets of torn robes on the ground. So it was like this. I never thought that Burning Wind would die in such a sullen manner. He must be filled with resentment underground. Ruanjing looked over. Brother Qin's luck is quite good. After confirming that Burning Wind's death was the result of a fisherman taking advantage of the situation, everyone let out a sigh of relief. Qin Yu had a calm expression. He didn't reveal the least bit of panic because he was exposed. "My luck has always been good. Ruanjing, if you don't believe me, you could try. Let's see who dies today." Ruanjing laughed. "Brother Qin must be joking. From the first time I met you, I never dared to underestimate your strength." He paused for a moment, and then his smile became even brighter. "So, in order to show how much I value Brother Qin, since I am prepared to kill you, we will naturally join forces." Qin Yu said, "It is rare to see someone with skin as thick as yours." Ruanjing nodded. "Thank you for Brother Qin's praise." The cultivator from the Thunder Dominion stood at the side with mockery in his eyes. He thought to himself that the master was right. Putting aside the cultivation level of those who came from Xiangzhang Academy, in terms of shamelessness alone, no one could beat them. But this Qin Yu was quite calm. The Thunder Dominion cultivator looked at Qin Yu. Although he was surrounded and it was clear that he was about to face a perilous situation, he didn't reveal the least bit of panic. Of course, this was all an act. In this situation, it was impossible for a normal person to maintain such a calm appearance. But then again, to be able to act like this in such a situation in itself wasn't simple. Thinking of this, the Thunder Dominion cultivator couldn't help but feel a bit of appreciation. He thought that if there was a chance, he might as well give Chinyu a quick death so he wouldn't suffer anymore. That's right, appreciation was appreciation, but the Thunder Dominion cultivator wasn't optimistic about Chinyu's fate. He swept his eyes around. Of those that came here, including Ruan Jing, none of them were easy to deal with. Even if he didn't fear fighting one-on-one, he would still be forced into a passive position if he faced two. And if there were three, he could only flee in panic. But now, Chinyu was facing a total of 7 people. The strength they could erupt with when they joined forces could even withstand several strikes from a half-saint. Since we've seen the main character, let's attack. A cultivator said, his icy cold eyes locked onto Chinyu. Because of the space laws, Chinyu is absolutely the most famous of all the cultivators that entered the mystic realm. When the secret of the human bead was revealed to the public, countless cultivators had imagined just how happy it would be if they could kill Chinyu. And now, this chance was right in front of them. Ruan Jing smiled and cupped her hands together. Brother Qin, have a safe journey. Bang, bang. A wild strength instantly erupted, tearing apart the fog. It was like a broken dam, its momentum swallowing the world. Qin Yu's body tensed. His eyes instantly turned dark, like the deep night, without any impurities. A darkness as thick as ink was released from his body, spreading out in all directions like a gaping maw that could swallow all. The attacks from the 7 people crashed into the darkness in the blink of an eye. The darkness violently tumbled, expanding over 10 times its original size. Then, in the next moment, it was forcefully torn apart by a wild strength. Chinyu fell to his knees, blood flowing out from every orifice on his head. Countless wounds opened up on his body and blood gushed out. In an instant, his black robes were soaked through. Drip, drip, blood dripped down from the corners of his robes, falling to the ground and shattering. Chinyu's appearance was miserable, but as the 7 people saw this, their complexions became increasingly dignified and a trace of admiration appeared in their eyes. It had to be known that the darkness that erupted just now had resisted their attacks in an instant. For Chinyu to survive was already amazing enough. If it were them, no matter how much they didn't want to admit it, the truth was that none of the 7 of them had any confidence they would have survived. Ruan Jing was secretly shocked. Luckily, she hadn't recklessly attacked Chinyu when they first met. Otherwise, there was a high chance he would have died. But in today's situation, no matter how strong Chinyu was, he couldn't escape death. Big Brother Qin. Master Yun's face was pale and blood flowed out from the corners of her lips. Even though Chinyu was blocking in front of her, the terrifying collision of strength had still injured her. Her hands nervously moved over Chinyu's body. Soon, her hands were dyed red, but she couldn't stop the blood from gushing out. Cough, cough. Chinyu coughed. His face paled even more, and more blood gushed out from his wounds. Don't worry, I'm fine. He spoke calmly, but his words clearly didn't have the slightest bit of credibility. More tears flowed down Master Yun's cheeks. She shook her head and hugged Chinyu's neck tightly. He didn't know if it was because he had lost too much blood, causing his body to fall into a weakened state. But at this moment, Chinyu felt that Master Yun's arms were too tight, so tight that he found it hard to breathe. Chinyu began to cough again. He raised his hand and patted Master Yun's hand, indicating for her to loosen her grip. But before he could speak, Master Yun let go. It was as if she couldn't dodge in time, as if she were hugging a red-hot iron. Then, Chinyu suddenly felt as if his chest was on fire, burning him so hot that he shivered. Pada! The lump of iron fell to the ground. The blood on its surface seeped into it, causing it to rapidly turn crimson. It was as if there was magma flowing within. Chapter 1192. Chinyu seemed to laugh and cry at the same time. At this time, he no longer cared about Master Yun's abnormal actions. He stared at the increasingly bright red lump of iron on the ground. He never imagined that he would make such a low-level mistake, one that was no different from a joke. The scene in front of him was enough to explain everything. In truth, activating the lump of iron was very simple. All he needed to do was pour his blood on it. What was sad was that Qin had spent a great deal of effort these past days. He didn't know how much magic power he had poured into the lump of iron, but all of it was useless. Zilala, the poison fog in the air, seemed to be incinerated by flames. With muffled sounds of corrosion, it rapidly faded away. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the crimson lump of iron on the ground. Of course, after it was activated, it wasn't appropriate to call it that anymore. Its appearance was the same as before. In fact, it was even redder and uglier than before. But at this time, its appearance couldn't affect anyone's perception of it. This was because in the world of cultivators, everything was fabricated. Only strength reigned supreme. And now, this lump of iron was recklessly spewing out a horrifying aura that left one's heart racing and filled with despair. It was truly terrifying, like a volcano erupting, like the vault of heaven shattering, like the world falling into a catastrophe that would destroy everything. Whether it was Ruan Jing or the Thunder Dominion cultivator, all 7 people froze. Fear erupted from the depths of their hearts, flooding into their eyes. Qin Yu coughed several times and spat out several mouthfuls of blood. He wiped his hands and sat down on the ground. He looked up at the 7 people and said, "Who else wants to kill me?" No one spoke. Ruan Jing, who had been lively from the start, kept his mouth tightly shut, not saying a single word more. What nonsense! In this situation, he wished he could find a hole to crawl into and run as far away as he could. If he continued to provoke Qin Yu, what was the difference between that and seeking death? Perhaps there was a difference. There were many ways to seek death, and most of them could leave with an intact corpse. But if Qin Yu were to attack now and be struck by this lump of iron, he feared he would instantly be vaporized. There wouldn't even be a speck of dust left over. That taste would surely be exhilarating to the extreme, but Ruan Jing swore that he didn't want to experience it at all. Gulp. It was unknown who gulped, but in this extremely quiet environment, it was particularly clear. But the good news was that everyone was scared to death, and no one would laugh at him. Cough. The Thunder Dominion cultivator squeezed out a smile. Fellow Taoist Qin, today was all a misunderstanding. She only said one sentence and couldn't continue the rest of the sentence. At this moment, Zhou Lei felt a little more admiration for Ruan Jing. It was too difficult for him to change his attitude so quickly and calmly. It could be seen that being thick-skinned was also a godly survival skill. That's right. It's all a misunderstanding. Our souls were injured by the poisonous mist, and we were momentarily distracted. That's why we attacked Brother Qin. Please forgive us, Brother Qin. A cultivator spoke with a face full of guilt. His eyes and expression were on point. With just a glance, one could feel that his chest was filled with shame and remorse. Zhou Lei of the Thunder Domain gasped in amazement. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It turned out that it wasn't just the people from Xiangzhang Academy who were shameless. There were many such cultivators outside. It was no wonder that the master rarely came out in the past few years. At the same time, he instructed them to minimize contact with the cultivators outside. Zhou Lei believed that he was one of the smarter ones among the cultivators in the lightning domain. If it had been anyone else, they would probably not have been able to react even after being tricked to death. Brother Qin, Ruan Jing cried out in pain. Tears streamed down his face. Everything is my fault. I coveted the space laws and made Brother Qin my enemy. Ruan Jing knows that I don't have the face to beg for mercy from you, but I ask that Brother Qin leave me an intact corpse so that I can have a chance to be buried in the Academy's mausoleum and accompany my late master. Zhou Lei's eyes widened. He looked at the pained Ruan Jing, who was filled with fear and remorse. Just what sort of trick was this? Although he hadn't had much contact with Ruan Jing, he had an approximate understanding of just what sort of person he was. It was him. Would he seek death on his own initiative? And he even said that he would leave him an intact corpse? To a cultivator, there were only 2 differences in the world: to live or to die. Death was death. No matter how well a corpse was preserved, There was no meaning to it. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. Looking at Ruan Jing's performance, he suddenly said, "Ruan Jing, I won't hide it from you. The truth is that I don't know much about Xiangzhang Academy, including you. So if you want to express something, you had best be direct. Otherwise, if I don't understand, I'll do as you ask." Ruan Jing's tears immediately stopped. He stared at Qin Yu and discovered that he really wasn't playing any tricks. He couldn't help but shiver. Damn it. He had almost messed things up. Qin Yu didn't know anything. His performance, just now, was like a blind man watching. Ruan Jing wiped away his tears and clenched his teeth. "My honorable master is the late headmaster of Xiangzhang Academy. He has countless brilliant disciples. The current headmaster, the 2 vice headmasters, and over 10 high-ranking lecturers are all my senior apprentice brothers. If I am killed, unless no news is leaked out, they will definitely take revenge for me at any cost." Zhou Lei was left dumbfounded. So there was such a thing in this world. It was simply refreshing. No, that damned Ruan Jing, that bastard had ill intentions. He said that no news would be leaked out, but he was clearly saying that only if he killed everyone here, or even everyone in this courtyard, could he guarantee that nothing would go wrong. Damn it! Out of everyone present, the person Qin Yu hated the most was Ruan Jing. Even if he had to kill someone, he would have killed him first. But now, because of this bastard's manipulation, his life was tied to everyone else's. Even if they swore that they wouldn't speak of today's events, would Qin Yu believe them? Haha, even an idiot would know the result. Zhou Lei glared at Ruan Jing, nearly grinding his teeth to pieces. The other cultivators weren't idiots. If looks could kill, Ruan Jing would have already been torn apart by them. But at this moment, Ruan Jing's complexion didn't change at all. Humph humph. Compared to life and death, there was nothing important in this world, let alone being stared a few times. Even if he was struck by a hammer, he would accept it. Qin Yu couldn't help but laugh. Putting aside his character, this Ruan Jing really was an interesting fellow. Interesting to the point that Qin Yu really wanted to do something right now and rip off his head. He was strong, his thoughts were meticulous and vicious, his skin thick enough, and he knew when to advance and retreat. In addition to Xiangzhang Academy's background, such an opponent was far too dangerous. But unfortunately, Qin Yu couldn't. At least, he couldn't today. "Get out of here." Qin Yu didn't laugh anymore. He coldly waved his hand. Ruan Jing turned and left, not pausing at all. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from sight. This reaction speed left Zhou Lei sighing. But sighing was just sighing. His speed wasn't slow either. Although she couldn't figure out why Qin Yu would let them leave so easily after things had come to this point. Could there be a problem with him? His thoughts raced, but it was only for a moment. He couldn't be sure whether or not there was a problem with Qin Yu. But there was one thing that was beyond doubt. If Qin Yu wanted to kill them, none of them would be able to escape today. Shwa, shwa. In a breath of time, the courtyard fell silent. Behind him, Master Yun's timid voice sounded out. "Big brother Qin." Her tone was a bit puzzled. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. "I also want to kill these bastards, but this thing can only be used once. Holding it can deter everyone, but if we use it, we'll be in trouble." He put away the red lump of iron in his chest. He glanced at Master Yun and said, "I'm not in a good state right now. I need to cultivate and recover from my injuries. Don't run around and stay by my side." Without giving Master Yun a chance to reply, Qin Yu began to adjust his breathing. As Master Yun watched Qin Yu close his eyes and his breathing returned to normal, she bit her lips and obediently sat down to the side. She looked at Qin Yu and then at him, blinking her large eyes. It was unknown what she was thinking. Then, the following days were peaceful. Of course, this so-called peace was only limited to the small courtyard where Qin Yu and Master Yun were. After being burned by the lump of iron, the poisonous fog was like an apple that had a piece bitten off. For some unknown reason, it never recovered. Qin Yu and Master Yun were undoubtedly much more relaxed now that they were free from the poisonous fog. But to the others, this period of time was nothing short of a hellish nightmare. Every day someone would die. After forming a human pearl, they would be swallowed up. The slaughter in the fog was carried out at all times. The poisonous fog became thicker, and its toxicity became more intense. One had to take more treasures to counteract the poison on their soul. Fortunately, the cultivators that survived swallowed the human pearl and grew stronger, just barely managing to resist the poison. But even so, a trace of unease rose from the depths of their hearts. No one knew how long this situation would last. The treasures in their hands were rapidly being depleted. If they wanted to guard against future calamities, they had to find a way to seize more treasures. Of course, seizing treasures, killing people, and swallowing human pearls could increase their strength and allow them to live longer. Thus, as time passed, the cultivators that survived were the most tyrannical ones. Everyone was wary of each other. But even though they were wary, they still had to fight. Thus, the battles became increasingly brutal. Of course, the victors of each battle also obtained greater benefits. It was as if there was an invisible hand in the courtyard, constantly lashing at the cultivators, forcing them to fight each other. Qin Yu frowned. As he looked at the thicker poisonous fog outside the courtyard, a thought became increasingly clear in his mind. Raising a parasite. That's right. The cultivators in the courtyard were like parasites in a jar. After being fed a large amount of food, they began to slaughter each other. But in the end, only one person could survive. Could it be that the master of this courtyard only allowed one cultivator to live? If this was really the case, then a brutal battle was unavoidable. Any cultivator that could live in a house that resembled a goo-rearing old man was not easy to deal with. Although Qin Yu had the iron lump to protect him, if things really came to a point where he had no choice but to risk his life, there would inevitably be trouble. And more importantly, he wasn't alone. He had Master Yin by his side. Thinking of this, he turned his head to look at the girl sitting on the ground not too far away. She rested her chin on her hands, her expression as calm as a painting. As if sensing Qin Yu's gaze, Master Yin turned her head and gave Qin Yu a big smile. Bright and beautiful. Qin Yu faintly smiled, his eyes warm and his smile doting. Thus, Master Yin's smile became even more dazzling. It had to be said that her smile was truly beautiful. It was so beautiful that Qin Yu subconsciously forgot about taking back the dark moon and crimson sun. The old turtle no longer dared to run out. According to what he said, the poison in the fog was already strong enough to harm him. If someone else had said this, Qin Yu would have believed them. But since it came from the mouth of the old turtle, he definitely had to discount it. According to Qin Yu's calculations, he should have felt threatened, but there was still some distance from the poison actually harming him. However, now that time had passed, whether or not the old turtle went out to probe the fog didn't matter much anymore. In the beginning, a massive number of cultivators had rushed into this courtyard, thinking that they had discovered a hidden treasure. But now, most of them had already died. The number of people still alive could be counted on two hands. Even if they were raising parasites, it should have ended by now. Could it be that only one person was allowed to live until the end? Even if they were stronger, what use was that? 2 more days passed. During this time, 2 great battles erupted. One of them was sky-split sword cultivator Ling Xiao. His current strength had risen to a terrifying degree. Even Qin Yu felt a chill in his heart when he used his final sword strike to kill his enemy. On the 3rd day, the poison fog that covered the courtyard finally began to retreat. A sharp light flashed in Qin Yu's eyes. This cruel and merciless slaughter was finally coming to an end, but he didn't know what awaited them next. Chapter 1193. The fog dissipated. In the end, including Qin Yu and Master Yin, there were only 9 people left. The rest had become human pearls. Strictly speaking, besides the one in Qin Yu's hand that belonged to the strange cultivator killed by burning wind, the rest had entered the stomachs of the surviving cultivators. This was cruel, but those who survived all had calm expressions. There was no regret, no unease, and no guilt at all. This was because within the poison fog that covered the courtyard, if they didn't kill others, they would be killed. There were many familiar faces here. Ruanjing, Ling Xiao, Hooking Soul, Thunder Domain Zhou Lei, everyone else had some impression of them. The cultivators that could survive to the end were certainly not ordinary characters. They gathered in the vestibule, each standing in a corner. The fog dissipated, disregarding whether or not they could condense a human pearl after killing so many people. Even if they could, it was unknown who died. Reality had already proven that everyone here was the most terrifying existence amongst predators. There were far too many uncertainties in a free-for-all slaughter. Of course, there was another reason. No one here was a fool. By now, they knew there was definitely a problem with this courtyard. They had stopped killing each other, but the true horror might have just arrived. Thus, the surviving cultivators all gathered in the vestibule. This was a tacit agreement to join forces to resist the unknown dangers. Qin Yu also arrived with Master Yun. His appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone revealed a dignified expression, although not everyone had personally witnessed the existence of this lump of iron. It was no longer a secret after so many days had passed. Qin Yu held this great killing tool in his hand. If he had any thoughts, they would be in great danger. Ruan Jing coughed. He moved several steps and stood together with the Skyren sword cultivator. As he moved, Hooking Soul also came to their side. The three of them had one thing in common. They had a tense relationship with Qin Yu. In this situation, as long as Qin Yu wasn't an idiot, the chances of him attacking them weren't high. But when it came to his own safety, it was best to be careful. Zhou coughed and smiled. Brother Qin, you've arrived. He decided to take the initiative to speak up and temper his own skin. He hoped that one day he could reach the level of Ruan Jing's strength. This goal seemed a bit too high. One shouldn't bite off more than they could chew. It was better to be realistic. Qin Yu nodded to Zhou, not saying anything. He could certainly feel the dread in everyone's eyes as they looked at him. This was very normal. If it were him, he would have done the same. Qin Yu brought Master Yun to a corner of the vestibule and looked up at the sky. His thoughts were similar to everyone else's. Since he had finished raising the goo, it was about time for the final step. The soul body of the middle realm of the body concealment realm. It was time to show up. As if sensing Qin Yu's thoughts at this moment, the air in the courtyard suddenly became a bit hotter. It was like burning charcoal. When Xiao Qian got a little closer, he could clearly feel a burning pain on his skin. Here it comes. Everyone cried out in their hearts at the same time. Their bodies tensed up and their eyes were filled with coldness. To raise them as goo worms, one had to have sufficiently powerful methods. Otherwise, they wouldn't mind letting the people behind them taste the feeling of backlash. But strangely, apart from the rising heat in the air, everything else was calm, and nothing had happened. No, to be exact, a change had occurred. The temperature was rising. The heat in the air was becoming more and more intense. If there was only one charcoal brazier that was slightly closer to each other before, there were now two, then three, and the number was still increasing. Cultivators defied the heavens and changed their fate. Apart from maintaining their appearance, the essence of an ordinary person had already transformed to a different level. Strictly speaking, the two sides were no longer the same species. They had an extremely strong ability to adapt to the outside environment. Being attacked by extreme heat and extreme cold was the most common problem. But wanting to cause substantial damage to a powerful cultivator like this was doomed to be futile. But everything had a limit, and the strength of a cultivator didn't have an upper limit. For instance, when Qin Yu rushed through the Arctic Sea, that terrifying chill had frozen him to death before he could even find the path back to Vastion. And at this time, the temperature in the courtyard was also gradually rising to a terrifying level. Everyone's complexion became dignified. They gloomily looked around, feeling a trace of unease from the burning heat in the air. The cultivators could still resist it, but there were some things in the courtyard that had begun to wither and turn yellow under the high temperature. It wasn't just the plants that would wither and turn yellow. Everything that grew in the courtyard, even a blade of grass, had been snatched away. But the stones were still there, the soil was still there, as well as the various materials used to build the courtyard. Now, It was as if their insides had been stripped of all moisture. Their color darkened and deepened until they finally turned yellow like fallen leaves. Sweat gushed out from his pores. Chinyu wiped his face and turned to look at Master Yun. She was even hotter than before. Her long dress was soaked through with sweat and stuck to her body. This clearly left Master Yun embarrassed. She looked at Chinyu, and her face flushed even redder. She lowered her head and twisted her fingers, at a loss as to what to do. "Stand behind me." Master Yun hurriedly nodded. She curled up her body and hid behind Chinyu. Perhaps it was because of her shyness, but even though she was standing close to Chinyu, she still maintained some distance between them. Chinyu smiled. His eyes paused on her body for a moment. Only when Master Yun's blush deepened did he look away. But the truth was that Master Yun was overthinking things. In this current situation, no one had the time to even look at her. A wet beauty was naturally a wonderful scene, but one had to look at the right time to enjoy the scenery. Given the current situation, no one knew what would happen. It was unknown whether or not everyone could survive. So who had the time to think about such things? It was even hotter. There was a light cracking sound beneath their feet. It came from where everyone was standing. The bricks on the ground cracked apart and turned into powder. Then flames shot out. In just a few breaths of time, the entire courtyard had turned into a sea of flames. A strange scene appeared. The courtyard and the flames hadn't been burned to ruins. Instead, it maintained its original appearance. But now, crimson lines began to appear on the surface of the buildings. These lines were like meridians. They appeared on the surface of the buildings. Amidst the raging flames, they became increasingly eye-catching. As these lines appeared, the temperature in the air began to rise at an astonishing speed. Even with Chinyu's powerful mortal body, he could clearly feel the burning pain. He had no choice but to use his cultivation to resist. The other cultivators were naturally in an even worse state. Master Yun began to sweat even more. She no longer cared about her shyness. Her face flushed red as she desperately resisted the burning heat. Seeing Chinyu lift his hand, she quickly shook her head. "Big brother Chin, I can still hold on. Don't waste your strength for me." "What a sensible girl." Chinyu reminded her. "Be careful. If you can't hold on any longer, tell me." The temperature crazily rose. Soon, it reached a point where everyone found it unbearable. "This courtyard wants to burn us to death. We cannot sit here and wait for death." With a loud roar, a cultivator rushed towards the courtyard gates. With a pung sound, the courtyard gate burst open. Everything went smoothly, and there was not the slightest danger. Seeing that someone had experimented on the mice safe and sound, everyone had reached the limit of their endurance. They didn't want to stay any longer. Whoosh, whoosh, with the sound of breaking air, they flew out of the courtyard. There was a bamboo forest around the courtyard, and there was fog in the bamboo forest. They had all experienced the poison in the fog before, but compared to the burning courtyard, the poison in the fog was nothing at all. But when they rushed out of the courtyard, they all froze in place. The bamboo forest? The fog? Around the courtyard, there was only a pitch-black void. There was nothing at all. Looking up, all they could see was a small gray sky where the courtyard was. Looking further out, there was only darkness, the bamboo forest and the poison fog. They still had many treasures in their hands, and their strength had increased by leaps and bounds, so they were confident they could rush through. But this pitch-black void in front of them was impossible. There was no reason for this. Just looking at it caused them to instinctively feel fear. A keen chill drilled out from the depths of their hearts and spread through their entire bodies, making them feel as if they had fallen into an icy lake. There was no way out. This caused the nervousness and panic in everyone's hearts to instantly double. Then they discovered something even more shocking. The black void was expanding. That's right, it was coming from all directions, slowly approaching. The speed wasn't too fast, but the space it left behind was very small. It was only the size of the courtyard. After secretly calculating, it wasn't hard to come up with a conclusion. In at most an hour, the black void would overlap with the courtyard. In other words, if they couldn't find a way to leave within an hour, They would have no choice but to return to the courtyard and continue to suffer the pain of being burned by the flames. There was even a chance they would have to face the dual attacks of the blazing flames and the black void. That feeling would definitely be exhilarating, so exhilarating that no one present, including Chinyu, wanted to personally taste it. And what left everyone even more anxious and depressed was that even now, they still hadn't seen the person controlling all of this from behind the scenes. Even if they desperately wanted to resist, they still couldn't find target. They rushed out of the courtyard and temporarily avoided the burning flames. But even though they were some distance away, they could still clearly feel the rising temperature of the flames. They could endure it just now, but if they went back, they absolutely could not go back. Within an hour, they had to find a way to leave this place. But soon, the people outside the courtyard furrowed their eyebrows and paled. They discovered that their previous calculations had been far too optimistic. Or, it was more accurate to say that as they approached the courtyard, the speed at which the black void spread out in all directions was accelerating. An hour, that was simply too much. From what they could see, it would arrive in front of them in at most a quarter hour. The eyes of the sword cultivators gathered together were filled with anger. They had just come up with a feasible plan. They would combine everyone's strength and use a secret technique in the Thunder Dominion to help Ling Xiao slash out a sword that surpassed his realm. They would forcefully tear apart this space and escape from this place. But this required time. The preparation of the secret technique was the simplest practice. Although it didn't take too long, it wasn't something that could be completed in a short period of time. In other words, this road had already been blocked off. As for other methods, perhaps there were, but there wasn't enough time. The black void was getting closer, so close that everyone could clearly see the surging within it. It was like a black sea, although it seemed calm. The truth was that it was filled with endless waves. Traces of cold energy constantly transmitted outwards. Suddenly, a strange and horrifying scene appeared in everyone's perception. Half of it was pitch black, and the other half was scorching hot. Qin Yu and the other 9 people had become minced meat sandwiched in the middle. It was like they could only watch helplessly on as they were cooked alive. This was truly a sorrowful and terrifying matter. Chapter 1194. The burning courtyard was so hot that it was hard to withstand it. But compared to the spreading darkness and nothingness, it was much more adorable. Of course, saying it was adorable was only relative. If Qin Yu and the other 8 people knew that this was the word, they would likely fly into a rage. Without a way out, no matter how much they struggled or how unwilling they were, they could only retreat to the front yard. Waves of heat rushed out. It was like a red-hot iron being pressed against one's flesh and blood, slowly sliding across the surface of one's body. Yunshi's exposed skin had turned crimson, reminiscent of a cooked prawn. The sweat that was seeping out of his pores evaporated into nothingness in an instant. Even so, she still squeezed out a smile and refused Qin Yu's help. Her reason was the same as before, to prevent him from wasting his strength. Qin Yu thought for a moment. Seeing her firm attitude, he nodded and agreed. But right now, the one in the most miserable state wasn't Master Yun, but the cultivator who rushed out of the courtyard first. Perhaps it was because of his cultivation method, or perhaps it was a natural defect, but when he faced the high temperature of flames, his ability to resist was clearly much worse than his cultivation should have been. His skin melted, turning into red mucus that constantly bubbled and dripped to the ground. Even the facial features on his face were continuously melting away. It gave off the feeling that he was a wax doll that had been heated. This scene was horrifying to the extreme. His breathing was stifled and his body constantly twitched. Although this cultivator didn't make a single sound, everyone could still feel the inhuman pain he was suffering. He really didn't want to face the invading darkness and nothingness outside the courtyard. But if he continued to stay here, all that awaited him was death. The flesh and blood in his eyelids and eye sockets had already melted away, revealing 2 bloodshot eyes that were twice as large as normal. Of course, this made them even more horrifying. A trace of despair and unwillingness flashed in the depths of his eyes. He roared and rushed out of the courtyard. He had a rush in at least once. Although he could sense that the darkness and nothingness were filled with dangers, what if he could survive? He had killed countless opponents and swallowed a human being to survive to this day. It was impossible for such a cultivator to simply wait for death to arrive. Even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, he had to fight with everything he had. Bang! The courtyard door was pushed open, and what entered everyone's eyes was boundless darkness. When he was looking at it from afar, he could already feel the terrifying aura contained within the darkness. Now that it was right in front of him, he realized that what he had felt previously wasn't even half as scary as it was. With a roar, the cultivator rushed out of the door and punched out with all his strength. The wild power slammed into the darkness and then disappeared. Then, this cultivator and his punch were both swallowed by the darkness as though nothing had happened. Everything remained the same as before. This scene caused everyone in the courtyard who was bitterly resisting the scorching heat to freeze. Even in such a hot environment, cold sweat broke out on their backs. Although everyone was able to clearly sense how frightening that darkness was, they did not expect it to be this frightening. The cultivators that charged into the darkness were similar to the people that Ranfeng had killed. They were people of unknown origins and unknown reputations. But to be able to survive until today and become one of the 9 survivors, there was no doubt about his strength. However, it was precisely this type of powerful cultivator who was comparable to them, who was powerful enough to contend against them, who charged into the dark void. That person was finished before even a splash was made. If it were them, how good could their fates be? Even if they thought they were stronger and had some life-saving cards in their hands, in the face of this endless darkness, it was likely that they would be of limited use. As fear enveloped everyone and despair rose in the air, Chinyu looked at the dark void outside the door, a sharp light flashing in his eyes. He felt that he needed to change his plan, and this was undoubtedly the best opportunity. If he could control it well, not only could he jump out of the attack's line of sight in advance, but more importantly, he could extricate himself from danger. Perhaps he could even watch a good show. Puff! Chinyu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. As soon as it left his body, it began to burn, filling the air with the thick smell of blood. Master Yun was shocked. Big brother Chinyu bitterly smiled. I was severely wounded in my early years. Although I have recovered, I have left behind a scourge. If I encounter an attack from the power of fire, it might be triggered. His face paled, his eyes dimmed, and his aura became unstable. Master Yin, I'm sorry. I must leave this place, otherwise only death awaits me. He gave her an incomparably apologetic and sorrowful look. Then, his figure flashed, and he rushed out the door. Before anyone could react, he was like a pebble that fell into the dark nothingness, vanishing from sight. Big brother Qin. Master Yun's eyes widened. Qinyu left. He left just like that. She bit her lips and lowered her head, not allowing others to see the expression on her face. The entire front yard was deathly silent. Ruan Jing, Ling Xiao, and everyone else couldn't help but widen their eyes. They never imagined that such a thing would happen. In the current situation, it was normal for people to die. But in their opinion, Qinyu shouldn't have died so early. Damn it. Of course, they weren't sad because they were on good terms with Qinyu. But not long ago, they were all thinking about that lump of metal in Qinyu's hand. Although Qinyu hadn't truly activated the strength contained within that lump of metal that day, that terrifying and destructive aura had left a deep impression on all of them. If they could activate that thing, perhaps they would have a chance to open up a channel to leave. Originally, they had hoped to wait until the situation became more perilous before bringing up this matter to ensure that they wouldn't be rejected. But now, all of these considerations were meaningless. Before they could even speak, Qinyu had already rushed into the dark void. Bastard, even if your old wounds relapse, you won't die so quickly. What are you being so impulsive for? That lump of metal was in your hand. Why didn't you take it out and try blasting him with it? Perhaps we could have survived. But now it was all over. Everything was over. If it were before, without Qin Yu's protection, perhaps Master Yin might have been able to pique their interest. But now, death was knocking on their door. Who would care about her? Not to mention, in such a terrifyingly high temperature, even protecting themselves would be a problem. After capturing her, they didn't want to watch her die and even split a portion of their strength to protect her life. Of course, no one would do such a stupid thing. Nothing unexpected happened. After swallowing Qin Yu, the dark void remained the same as when it swallowed the first cultivator, not changing at all. Master Yin looked deeply at the place where Qin Yu had rushed into. Then, she hugged herself and curled up on the scorching ground. Zilala. The sound of flesh and blood being corroded rang out. She seemed to have lost the will to continue living and gave up resisting the high temperature on her own initiative. In the blink of an eye, the calm and picturesque girl's flesh and blood melted away, turning into a stiff corpse. The aura of life rapidly faded from her body. Several people looked at her. When they discovered that no human pearls had condensed, they revealed a trace of disappointment. At this time, it would be good if they could increase their strength by just a tiny bit. Perhaps they could save their lives in a critical moment. In the blink of an eye, the 9-person survivor squad was reduced to 6 people. The atmosphere in the front yard became even more oppressive, so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. The sword cultivator Skypiercer suddenly said, "We've already lost all hope. If we want to live, we can only rely on ourselves." He indifferently swept his eyes over everyone. Ruan Jing bitterly smiled. Indeed, things have come to this point. There's no point in hiding anymore. He paused for a moment and then continued to say, "I was wrong to tie my life to everyone's. But this also shows that I really don't want to die. If everyone wants to continue living, then reveal your trump cards. Don't continue to place your hopes on others." The Thunder Dominion's Zhou Lei said, "All right." Hooking Soul looked down at a drop of blood floating in his hand. It emitted a faint blood-red light, without any warning or response. It seemed that Qin Yu had really died. Xiao Chun loosened his grip, and the drop of blood instantly evaporated due to the high temperature in the air. The Sly Life clan has a half-sage existence. He once bestowed me with an eye that can pierce through all fog and see straight to the essence. Ling Xiao raised the sword in his hand. "My trump card is this." Ruan Jing opened the book and carefully took out a folded piece of yellow paper. "This is the personal handwriting of the Academy's half-sage. The object of a saint was tainted with the great Tao and naturally had its own spirituality. The moment it appeared, it could feel the threat from the outside world and the powerful aura of its own kind." The cry of a sword rang out. Cracks began to appear on the sword in Ling Zhao's hand, and a terrifying sword intent gushed out from within. In the void above his head, a towering figure appeared. He held a sword in his hand, and his eyes were closed. Even though he was motionless, a heaven-shaking and terrifying aura was constantly released. It was as if all things in the world could be cut apart. The yellow paper that Ruan Jing took out left her hand and unfurled in the air. Dazzling golden characters flew out from the paper, constantly spinning in the air, profound and formidable, as if they contained the aura of some supreme Tao law of the heavens and earth. When one looked at them, they would instinctively feel awe. An image of a scholar in wide-sleeved blue robes appeared in front of everyone's eyes. He was bent over a desk, and his brush moved like dragons and snakes, resonating with the heavens and earth. With a loud rumble, thunder roared in the highest heavens, and endless spiritual strength tumbled about. Hooking Soul's performance was the strangest. His left eye suddenly turned crimson red. After a few blinks, it seemed to come alive. It was incomparably monstrous. It was the eye of Hooking Soul, but now it gave off the feeling that it was being controlled by someone else. Under its gaze, nothing could hide. Rumble, rumble, there really was thunder roaring. Black lightning spread out from the surface of Zhou Lei's body. It was incomparably deep, even thicker than the dark nothingness of the outside world. This thunder was bestowed by my Thunder Dominion's Lord. There was no need for further explanation. Just the aura of this black thunder and the prestige of the Thunder Dominion's lord was enough to leave one's heart racing. Outside the residence, in the dark nothingness, Qin Yu rubbed his chin. If he didn't force them a bit, he really wouldn't have known that they were all hiding so many cards in their hands. Whether it was the hooking soul's blood-red eye, soaring heaven's sword, Ruan Jing's yellow paper, or the black thunder from the Thunder Dominion, all of them gave Qin Yu an extremely dangerous feeling. To be more precise, any one of them had the power to give him a fatal strike. This caused Qin Yu to subconsciously think of Flaming Wind, who had died under his hands. As a formidable cultivator that was on par with these cultivators, could Flaming Wind, who came from the fire-bathing lineage, also have a similar card in his hand? There was a high probability that he did. It was just that Qin Yu's attack had been too quick and too decisive. He hadn't given Flaming Wind any time to react before his life force was completely extinguished. Of course, part of this was due to the old turtle's efforts. In terms of dealing with souls, he was indeed skilled. There was a lingering fear, more or less. If Flaming Wind had really been allowed to reveal his trump card, it would be hard to say who would have died and who would have lived. However, this lingering fear was only a momentary fear. Flaming Wind had already died, and he was still alive and kicking. This was an indisputable fact. As for the remaining two cultivators, one took out a spear and the other took out a paper bird. The long spear was crimson and emitted a wild and overbearing aura. As soon as it appeared, it swept through the surroundings. But now, what attracted Qin Yu's attention the most was another paper bird. It was exquisitely crafted, and its wings gently trembled, as if it would flap its wings in the next moment and instantly soar into the highest heavens. Compared to the other treasures that were stained with the aura of a saint, this paper bird appeared very ordinary. It didn't release any formidable aura, but after it appeared, the incomparably tyrannical auras of the various treasures that erupted just now all restrained their auras at the same time. This was clear proof. As for Qin Yu, he also learned the name of a half-saint through the shouts of the crowd, Stacked Kite. Listening to the name, she should be a woman. She had the flavor of a literary young woman. But even if she was a literary young woman, she was definitely one of the fiercest. Everyone here was a half-saint, but it was clear that there was still a disparity in strength between half-saints. The one who took out the paper bird was a woman. Her appearance could only be considered average. As she faced the crowd, she revealed a trace of arrogance. It was only toward Zhou Lei that she showed a bit of respect. The Thunder Dominion's master was recognized by all heavens as one of the strongest powerhouses beneath the ruler. And as one of Stacked Kite's disciples, she certainly knew that these words weren't false. The so-called strongest powerhouse beneath the ruler was referring to a saint who had crossed the sea and reached the other shore, a saint who had thoroughly achieved the Tao. In other words, in the eyes of those with a clear mind, the Thunder Dominion's master, who rarely came into contact with the outside world, actually possessed the strength to fight with a saint. This was certainly worthy of respect. Even if Zhou Lei wasn't strong enough, his background was enough. Indeed, those that could live to the end had their reasons. These 6 people all had a saint-level background. Qin Yu rubbed his chin. Strictly speaking, he seemed to be the weakest chicken in this group. Of course, that iron lump was an exception. This thing could shock and awe a group of fellows who held the trump cards of saints. Just imagine how fierce it was. Cough, cough, that was right. The scope was indeed everyone. This also included Yun Shi, who had chosen to commit suicide as soon as she jumped out of the trap and hid in the dark nothingness. Qin Yu's eyes fell on her dark red corpse. A trace of admiration appeared in his eyes. He thought that this woman was truly ruthless to herself. To think that she would even be willing to use such a miserable method of death on herself. This was far too unsightly. But the effect was excellent. It was clear that the 6 cultivators in the courtyard hadn't noticed her exquisite performance at all. They had been preparing to erupt with their trump cards to rush out of this place. In truth, Qin Yu hadn't noticed anything at the start. Even when she had strangled him and he had nearly died, he hadn't noticed anything. That was until the iron lump woke up. Then, with the help of the old turtle, Chinyu finally figured out what had happened after a period of time. This left him a little terrified. Truly, he was terrified. It wasn't shameful to say it out loud. In that situation, anyone in Chinyu's position would be afraid. The good news was that the iron lump seemed to be a good deterrent. Of course, Chinyu's acting skills were also very good. At the very least, Yinshi didn't know that Chinyu already knew something that she thought he didn't know. Cough, cough. It was a mouthful, but that was the situation. Thus, when the dark nothingness approached and he finally determined its attributes, he immediately changed his plans after he determined that he could safely hide inside. He jumped out of the chess game and used the old turtle to conceal his aura. In the dark, his ability was stronger than Chinyu had imagined. When Soul Hooking had tried to determine whether he was dead or alive, Chinyu wasn't worried at all. Even Yunshi hadn't discovered him hiding in the dark, so what could the sly Fate clan do? Don't be fooled by his reputation. In terms of ability and strangeness, 10 Soul Hooking clansmen added together couldn't compare to one Yunshi. Chinyu blinked his eyes and let out a breath of relief. The higher one stood, the farther one could see. The dark nothingness had enveloped the entire courtyard, which meant that Chinyu could see everything from 365 degrees without any blind spots. Then he saw a furnace. That's right. This courtyard that was once filled with treasures was now burning with crimson lines. It was a furnace that had been ignited, and the flames were raging, ready to incinerate everyone. But even now, Chinyu still couldn't figure out what Yinshi was trying to do. The good news was that even though he couldn't figure it out, he had a chance to see Yinshi give him the final answer. Judging from the current situation, the answer should be very close. Chapter 1195. I had never thought of harming anyone. I only wished for the days to be peaceful and peaceful. But there was often a vast difference between my wishes and reality. I was born with a spirit. How could I be willing to spend my life working for others and end up with my soul and body destroyed? So I fought for my life. Even if my hands were stained with blood, I would not feel the least bit of guilt or regret. If I wanted to blame someone, I could only blame those greedy people who had already achieved the great Tao. But in the end, the Saint Tao is still the Saint Tao. Although I didn't hesitate to fall into depravity in exchange for greater strength, I still don't have absolute confidence I can succeed. Luckily, many years ago, because of a turning point, I left myself a path of retreat. Death is also a new beginning. Zhou Lei followed the low-key style of doing things in the Thunder Domain. Naturally, the disciple of the stacking Yuan quasi-sage, who revealed a trace of arrogance, became the leader of the six. We only have one chance. We must ensure that nothing goes wrong. Xianji's voice was calm, but her tone was solemn. That's right, this was her name. It was said that Stacking Iris had personally given it to her, and it was also the name of her favorite origami. If we kill the spirit body hidden within the boundary, we can naturally retreat, whether it was the burning courtyard or the dark void outside. The reason they appeared here was because they were being controlled by the spirit body. If they killed the controller, the situation would collapse. They would use the trump cards bestowed upon them by 6 half-saints at once. Of course, they wouldn't do something like putting the cart before the horse. Killing the spirit body was their true goal. As he listened to the 6 people discuss, Chinyu gradually understood just what was going on. Deep within the endless sea, in the land of chaos, a spirit body was born. The reason it was called this was because it was born with a spirit and was a different life form bred by the heavens and earth. For some unknown reason, the spirit body in the land of chaos was exposed. Thus, it was targeted by some saints. Although it wasn't clear why the saints captured the spirit body, it must have an extremely important function for them. This was something that even saints coveted. From this, it could be seen just how precious a spirit body was. The reason that so many tyrannical cultivators had entered the endless sea was because this spirit body had matured. In other words, after many years, it had finally reached the point where it could be picked. The saints did not take action personally. According to Qin Yu's speculations, firstly, the battle between the saints involved a lot of things, and it was extremely easy for things to go out of control. Secondly, it should have something to do with the spiritual body hiding in the endless sea. If so many sages were to descend and fight here, Shimming World would probably be smashed into pieces. Of course, this wasn't the main point. Chinyu rubbed his eyebrows. A helpless look on his face, he seemed to have misunderstood the situation. Since this spiritual body within the realm was something in the eyes of the sages, how could they allow it to be taken away so easily? No wonder the little blue lamp had hidden itself so well and hadn't revealed even the tiniest bit of its aura from the start. At the Saint Realm, the entire world was being sensed. As long as it made a move, it would definitely be discovered. Recently, he had used the spirit body of a realm within the realm as bait to order the old turtle to do many things. Would it be bad to go back on his word? But I had no choice. No matter how confident Chinyu was, he did not think that he could challenge a saint with his current strength. Unless he could completely master light and darkness as one, he would probably only have a slight chance. But this required time, and it would be a very long period of time. It was useless to think about these things right now. He had wasted half a day of effort, fought a life or death battle with others, and then mixed himself into this matter. But in the end, he discovered that this was all a game of chess played by the sages. Was he moved? Of course he didn't dare to move. In the dark nothingness, Chinyu rubbed his face. You already know what happened, so you really can't blame me. I'll think of a way to compensate you in the future. The old turtle was silent. Chinyu said, Don't be angry. This is a natural disaster. There's really nothing we can do. If we touch something of the sages, even if we had 9 heads, it wouldn't be enough for them to pinch us. Master, what you say is correct. I also understand. The old turtle's voice was calm, but Chinyu could actually feel that something was wrong. What do you want to say? The old turtle said, What I want to say is that, Master, you must save me. If I can't obtain the spiritual body this time, I am finished. It was still that calm tone. Chinyu really wanted to curse out loud. Stop pretending. I am well aware of your condition. Nothing will happen to you for the time being. But he frowned again and again, unable to say these words. After a moment of silence, he said, Is what you say true? Yes, it is absolutely true. This time, Chinyu finally caught onto the trace of something wrong in the old turtle's calm tone. What was that smell? Fear. It was fear. After one surpassed the limit of what they could bear, the abnormal calmness they displayed. Chinyu's complexion instantly darkened. Just what is going on? The old turtle's voice trembled. This is the vast young world. Master, you were born here, so even if you use the power of the abyss, you can still be recognized by the world's source. But I cannot, my origin. Every time I take action in the vast young world, I consume an astonishing amount of energy. Moreover, I also need to resist the suppression from the world's source. Now he understood. Chinyu felt a bit of a toothache, so the problem still lay with him. Although the old turtle hadn't explained things too clearly, he knew his own situation. The reason the old turtle had acted during this period of time was because he had ordered him to. Let go of your consciousness. Chinyu closed his eyes. His thoughts descended into the old turtle's body. It was incomparably empty, as if all that was left over was an empty shell. It was true. Chinyu opened his eyes. Why didn't you say so earlier? If I knew, I wouldn't have allowed you to consume so much energy. The old turtle wept. You are my master. My entire family's life depends on a single thought from you. How could I dare to not listen to you? Moreover, everything had been fine. This spirit body was right in front of him. As long as he could grab it and eat it, he would immediately be restored to full health. Who knew that a group of saints would suddenly jump out and snatch away the roasted duck that was right in front of his mouth? Chinyu was silent. The old turtle cried even louder. Master, save me. You must save me. I am loyal and devoted to you. Keeping me by your side is useful. As a peak outstanding talent of the death-fearing world, he could clearly feel the fear and collapse in the heart of the old turtle. Chinyu was distraught by his crying. He couldn't help but seriously consider the feasibility of seizing the spirit body as well as the inevitable shockwaves that would follow. Just thinking about being hunted down by the saints left his entire body cold. But he couldn't just stare blankly on as the old turtle died. In the past, he had exhausted a great deal of strength and hadn't hesitated to rush through the icy sea. It could be said that he had narrowly escaped death in order to bring him back from the abyss to vast yawn. If he were to be crippled like this, then not only would the little blue lamp fly into a rage, but Chinyu also couldn't agree to it. Then he could only take a risk. The only chance left for Chinyu was that the saints hadn't personally arrived. If things were done in secret, then there might still be a chance of success. As long as he captured the spirit body and fed it to the old turtle to eat, then even if the saints had transcendent methods, they wouldn't be able to find it again. Regarding this, Chinyu was quite confident. In other words, the difficulty lay in the process of capturing the spirit body. If it was just Chinyu alone, then the chances of him successfully dealing with a spirit body within the boundary were nearly zero. But luckily, in the burning courtyard, there were 6 cultivators of a certain generation who were prepared to go all out and give the spirit body a ruthless blow. If they could really succeed and kill the spirit body, then Chinyu didn't mind becoming a corpse collector. There would definitely be risks, but as long as he grasped the opportunity and had a little bit of luck, there was still a chance. Of course, besides this, Chinyu also had another hidden card that no one else knew about. His eyes flashed as he looked at the mummified Master Yin. "My name is the Old Turtle. Bah, I won't call you that. But that's not the point. The point is that I'm panicking right now. Ever since I was born, this is the second time in my life that I've truly reached a life or death juncture. I can't die. I absolutely can't die. Right now, the only one who can save me is that Chinyu. That brat's luck has always been good, so there definitely won't be any problems this time. As long as you save me, I promise that in the future I will sincerely call you Master and won't hide anything from you. For instance, light and darkness as one, or even the source of the world. I do know a lot, and once I come back to life, I will tell you everything. Why don't you tell me now? Are you an idiot? What if Chinyu thinks I'm unreliable and decides to go with the flow and ignore me? Then wouldn't that be the same as playing himself to death? I won't call myself the Old Turtle. I'm panicking. I want to live." The Old Turtle wasn't the only one who wanted to live. Bang! Above the residence, there was only a small expanse of gray sky left. But now it suddenly shattered. Countless cracks spread out like a dense spider web, covering every corner. Then, golden characters soared into the skies. They shuttled back and forth between the spatial cracks, as if they were searching for something. Suddenly, the yellow paper ignited on its own. The golden characters released a blinding light that howled into one of the spatial cracks. The cry of a sword and the howl of a spear echoed out. Up! A heaven-shaking sword and blood-red spear instantly tore open this spatial crack, forming a channel. Countless violent explosions echoed out from deep within the channel. The seals hidden within were brutally pierced through. The paper bird flapped its wings and flew away. At this time, a clear and resonant cry rang out in everyone's ears. A vast strength erupted from the paper bird. It burned like the yellow paper, and then a giant flaming bird appeared out of thin air. Its body was covered in 9 colored feathers. Wrapped in flames, its entire body overflowed with brilliant light. A powerful and noble aura swept through the world. With a loud cry, the 9-colored firebird flew into the channel that had been opened. It let out a startled and angry roar, one filled with pain. Zhou Lei was the last to attack. Black thunder gathered around his body and gathered in his palm, turning into a ring. This ring was the size of a child's palm and as black as ink. With a shake of his arm, the ring howled out, following the 9-colored firebird's aura into the distance. After several breaths of time, with a desperate roar, the channel collapsed. The 6 cultivators in the residence all spat out blood. Their connection to the saint objects they had stimulated had been completely severed. The burning residence began to extinguish, and the dark nothingness began to recede. The 6 people weren't the only ones who spat out blood. Their eyes lit up with joy. They had succeeded. With the strength of 6 half-sages as one, they had locked onto the location of the spirit body and forcefully opened up a channel, killing it in its lair. Although they would inevitably have to fight for the spirit body's body after this, at least there was a high chance they would be able to leave this place alive. When the flames vanished and the darkness receded, there was a loud cracking sound that echoed in everyone's ears. Like a mirror that had been struck by a tremendous force, it shattered into countless pieces. This is bad. The realm within the realm is about to shatter. This spirit body actually connected the realm within the realm to its body. Once it dies, the mystic realm will immediately collapse. Damn it, there's no time to find its body. Everyone who had just been overjoyed became shocked and angry. In the next moment, the impact of the realm within the realm shattering instantly drowned the 6 of them. Outside the Xianming world, the gazes that were focused on this place turned grave. The mystic realm had shattered. In their senses, the aura belonging to the spirit body had already disappeared. In other words, it had been killed, and at the same time, the entire mystic realm had been destroyed along with it. Just from a perspective of chasing after the spirit body, this was probably the worst outcome. The spirit body's body had been destroyed by the mystic realm and was swept away by the space turbulence. Finding it would be a matter of luck. Even if a sage took action, there was nothing they could do. They could only chase after the space turbulence, determine its general direction, and trace it bit by bit. But now, even though the sages outside the Xianming world had memorized the direction of the space turbulence, no one chased after it. Because this time, they had made an even more important discovery in the endless sea. Space law. The thoughts of Sage were extremely powerful. Even if they had not descended into the Xianming world, they could still cover the entire world. Furthermore, they only needed to focus their divine senses. In the land of chaos, they could detect any abnormal vibrations. But there was nothing. The sages' senses were blank. Not only were there no space laws, even the disciples they had sent into the mystic realm had all disappeared. Boom, boom, boom. In the sky above the endless sea, the violent and chaotic sea surface of the land of chaos suddenly fell silent. The wild winds and furious waves receded at the same time. The sea surface in front of them was flat like a giant mirror. The air was dead silent. There was no longer any sound. A ferocious-looking sea demon seemed to be frozen in a layer of ice. Its body was unable to move, and its eyes were wide with fear. With a muffled sound, the sea demon's head exploded. The red and white matter remained in the state it had been in at the moment of destruction. And at this time, it was not just this sea demon that had been killed. The sea demon was dead silent. On this mirror-like sea region, the smell of blood was so strong that it was almost tangible. Blurry faces appeared in the sky. They opened their dignified and indifferent eyes and looked at this sea region. This was the form that a sage's consciousness would take when it reached a certain level of strength. The terrifying pressure of a sage descended upon the Xianming world. At this moment, all living beings in the entire world who had gained sentience felt a powerful pressure from a higher level of life. They were terrified and knelt on the ground uncontrollably. Their bodies trembled, and their hearts were filled with despair. The rage of a sage was enough to destroy the world and slaughter all living beings in a world. Not to mention that there were 7 sage auras that had descended upon the Xianming world. With just a thought, the world would collapse and all living beings would be destroyed. Chapter 1196. Only by crossing the ocean and reaching the shore could one achieve the great Tao. This was the position of a saint. However, this did not mean that a saint could be fearless. The vastness of the world was boundless, and there were countless legends about it. Even a sovereign realm expert couldn't do as he pleased. Everyone had their limits. Destroying a world with a thought and killing billions of beings was not difficult for a saint. However, they had to bear the punishment from the origin of the world. Only those in the saint realm knew what it was. But over the years, there were very few saints who destroyed a world. One could see that the punishment was extremely heavy. The consciousnesses of the 7 saints of Xianming world descended. They did not want to destroy the world. They wanted to find the fluctuations of the laws of space and the cultivators under them. But as the secret realm shattered, all the presences were destroyed and disappeared. Even with the consciousnesses of the saints, they could not find any suspicious traces. There was only one explanation. The cultivators in the secret realm, including the person who controlled the laws of space, had all died with the shattering of the secret realm. The 7 saints were silent. Before today, none of them had thought that this would be the result of their attack. The spirit body that was born in the land of chaos was stronger than they had imagined. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to drag everyone down with him and kill them all. With a sigh, the consciousnesses of the 7 saints dissipated. Since things had come to this, what they could do now was to find the body of the spirit body that had been swept away by the chaotic streams of space. It was much stronger than he had imagined, so the use of this body should be even better. The Saint Tao was emotionless. It was not really heartless. It was just that it could eliminate unnecessary emotional interference and make the best decision. Since it had no value, there was no need to waste more time and energy here. The terrifying pressure that filled Xianming world retreated like the tide. The moment the secret realm shattered, a restraining aura exploded from their bodies. It completely sealed the power of the 6 generations of cultivators. This was a true seal. Not even a single finger of his was able to move his entire body. They were furious but could not react at all. Then, the 6 generations of cultivators fell into endless darkness. While they could not move in the darkness, their minds were clear. That was why they felt even more shocked and terrified. Even though they had no idea what was going on, they were able to guess the root of the problem after calming down and thinking about it. At this moment, the power erupting from within their bodies and imprisoning them was most likely related to the treasures they had swallowed, or even the human pearls. He had thought that even if there was something wrong with his body, it would lose its effect after getting rid of the spirit body within the realm. That's not right. The 6 people who were imprisoned were all horrified. Was the spiritual body of a cultivator really killed? If that was the case, then who was the one plotting against them now? If the spirit body didn't die, just the thought of it caused the 6 of them to feel a chill run down their spines. It was all right. There was still hope. The mystic realm had already been destroyed. The sages would definitely sense what had happened in the Xianming world. As long as the sage made a move, even if the spirit body within the realm had a backup plan, it would still be destroyed. At that time, they would naturally be saved. Yes, just like that. In the darkness, there was no light at all. It was as if they had been exiled forever. Everything became blurry. Although every breath of time seemed to pass very slowly, his conscious mind was still able to determine the passage of time. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 5 breaths, 6 breaths, 10 breaths, 20 breaths. The hearts of the 6 cultivators who were trying their best to calm down could not help but start beating rapidly. This was because the sages did not make a move to save them. How could this be? Had the sages abandoned them? That was impossible. Not to mention their own value. It was highly possible that the sages would not give up on the spirit body that had not been killed, unless the sages had not been able to find them. As this thought surfaced, everyone's heart suddenly sank. As people close to the sages, they naturally knew how the sages did things. Once they could not find them, they would definitely think that they were already dead and had lost their value. They would not waste any more time on them. In other words, it was highly likely that the sages had already left. If that was really the case, suddenly, there was a light kacha sound in the darkness. It was as if a dry and difficult joint had suddenly moved. Fear surged in the eyes of the 6 cultivators at the same time. Even Xianji, who had been acting arrogant, was no exception. Kacha! Kacha! More and more light sounds entered their ears. It was accompanied by the sound of rubbing against the ground. They did not know what was happening until suddenly, there was an additional sound in the darkness. It was a gasp. It was as if someone who had been buried underground had suddenly drilled his way out. His urgent breathing revealed his eagerness to his heart's content. What followed was the sound of chest rising and falling, like two dry branches rubbing against each other. Pa! Pa! There was the sound of footsteps. Ruan Jing desperately wanted to regain his freedom, but there was no response from the strength that was imprisoned in his body. Suddenly, he felt as if he was grabbed by something. His entire body was lifted up and his heavy breathing reached his ears. There was a sharp pain in his neck, and Ruan Jing's eyes filled with horror. This was because he had been bitten. His heart raced uncontrollably, causing blood to gush out from the wound. Gulp, gulp. The sound of him gulping down blood was incomparably clear in the darkness. Ruan Jing could feel that as his blood was sucked out, his strength was also rapidly draining away. No, I don't want to die. As his blood and strength were plundered, the imprisoning strength began to weaken. It was like they were originally one with Ruan Jing, changing according to his strength and weakness. He barely managed to produce some muffled sounds. He desperately tried to lift his hands, but it was like two mountains were hanging down on him. He couldn't lift them at all. In the darkness, the other 5 people became increasingly panicked. Through the sounds, they had already determined that the one being attacked was Ruan Jing. There were gulping sounds in their ears. Although they couldn't see anything, the smell of blood was enough to explain everything. The unknown existence in the darkness was swallowing Ruan Jing's blood. Pa! There was the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. The good news was that Ruan Jing didn't seem to have been killed, but he was also extremely weak. All they could hear was his weak breathing. It was good news that he hadn't been directly killed. This was because there was a high chance that they wouldn't be able to avoid everything that Ruan Jing had experienced. Who would be next? After waiting for a long time, the unknown terror shrouded everyone's minds. The unknown existence in the darkness didn't continue attacking. Perhaps it had eaten its fill and needed to digest. To everyone, this was good news. Now was their chance to escape. From the sounds of breathing just now, they knew that the unknown existence in the darkness was also in a weakened state. As long as they could break free of the imprisonment within their bodies, they might be able to reverse the situation. In the deathly silence, time quietly passed. The remaining 5 people tried everything they could to restore their control over their strength. But unfortunately, it was useless. What left them in despair the most was that what imprisoned them was actually their own strength. Although it sounded funny that they were imprisoned by themselves, this was the truth. There was movement again. Listening to the sound of footsteps, the existence in the darkness was clearly much more agile. Everyone's hearts sank. It was clear that after swallowing Ruan Jing's blood, it had recovered a great deal. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Zhou Lei's neck suddenly tightened. He couldn't help but curse out loud. He thought that he could understand why Ruan Jing was the first to drink his blood. After all, this brat was so bad that he had sores all over his head and pus all over his feet. He deserved his bad luck. But Zhou Lei, was an upright person who was filled with love for the world. So why was he the second? Unfortunately, he couldn't protest. Of course, even if he could, the result would be an invalid rejection. His neck hurt and blood wildly gushed out. Zhou Lei immediately tasted the taste that Ruan Jing had just enjoyed. Blood gushed out and the strength in his body was plundered. He soon weakened. Although the imprisoning strength had mostly dissipated, he didn't have the strength to move at all. After an unknown period of time, just as Zhou Lei's consciousness was fading and he was about to die from being sucked dry, there was a loud thud as he was tossed to the ground. There was a buzzing sound in his head. For the first time, Zhou Lei felt that being unconscious was a happy thing. There was no more movement in the darkness. After sucking the blood of the second person, the existence in the darkness began to rest once more. The bad news was that the amount of time it rested this time was much shorter than before. As if because it had recovered some of its strength, its ability to digest and absorb energy had also improved. The third unlucky person was the Skypiercer sword cultivator. But at this time, an accident occurred. There was the cry of a sword, accompanied by a pained roar and the sound of flesh and blood being torn apart. The thing that had bitten down on the neck of the sky-piercer sword cultivator and was crazily sucking blood didn't think that sword intent would also gush out along with the blood. As a genius sword cultivator, Ling Xiao had tempered his body as a sword and had long since fused his flesh and blood with his sword Dao. His blood was also his sword, although all of his strength was imprisoned and he couldn't use it at all. But if he took the initiative to suck the sword into his mouth, he would naturally be stabbed. But soon, Ling Xiao also paid the price. There was the sound of heavy strikes in the darkness, accompanied by the sound of breaking flesh and bone. The smell of blood in his mouth and nose suddenly became thick. Soul-sucking was the fourth. Then there was the disciple of the spear-cultivating half-sage. Finally, there was the rice paper. This disciple of the stacking iris half-sage had been sucked dry for the longest time. He had nearly been sucked dry of all his blood. When he was tossed to the ground, he was gasping for breath, as if he could die at any moment. Pa! With a light sound, a candle suddenly lit up in the darkness. The light it emitted scattered the darkness a little. Although it wasn't very bright, it was still enough for cultivators to clearly see the person holding the candle. Eyes widened in shock and disbelief. Completely naked, Yinshi paid no heed to the fact that his entire body was exposed. Facing the gazes of the crowd, the corners of his lips curled up into a smile. I'm sure none of you would have thought that it would be me today, right? Her skin was fair and delicate, becoming increasingly dazzling in the candlelight. There was no longer any trace of her previous shriveled-up appearance. If it weren't for the blood staining the corners of her lips, it would be hard to believe that she was the one who had sucked the blood of everyone in the darkness. Pa! This little girl that no one had paid attention to from start to finish had actually appeared here, controlling everyone's life and death in her hands. Pa! With a light sound, a wound suddenly opened up on Master Yun's face. The wound was very deep, directly splitting apart her cheek and connecting it to her mouth. It was a horrifying sight. But what was strange was that not a single drop of blood flowed out from the exposed flesh and blood. She frowned, a trace of coldness appearing in the depths of her eyes. She walked to the side of Tong Tian's sword Xiao and heavily kicked him away. Amidst the crackling sounds, it was unknown how many bones were broken. She turned and grabbed Ruan Jing. He was the first one to be sucked up and was in the best condition. He had also secretly recovered some of his strength. But before he could do anything, he was caught by her mouth again. After a few bites, he became a soft-footed prawn again. As blood fell into her stomach, the wound on Master Yun's face began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. It returned to its clean and white state without the slightest trace left behind. Throwing away Ruan Jing, Master Yun smiled. I know that you must all be shocked and confused right now, but I won't explain. Of course, you don't need to be afraid, because you won't die anytime soon. You've eaten so much of my good stuff, so of course you have to produce enough to be fair. Don't you think so? Master Yin said she wouldn't explain, but everyone was quick-witted. How could they not understand the underlying meaning behind her words? The residence was her handiwork, and everything else was arranged by her. In other words, there was a high chance that Master Yun was the spirit body that had been killed in the boundary within the boundary. Impossible. Before entering the boundary within the boundary, everyone had seen this little girl that followed Qinyu. How could she have become the spirit body of a boundary within the boundary? But besides this, there was no other way to explain what was happening. Hee, don't you think this is unbelievable? In truth, there are times when I also think that things in this world don't make sense. Master Yin paced back and forth several times. She reached out and grabbed Zhou Lei, biting his neck and sucking him dry. After a few more mouthfuls, she tossed him aside and wiped her mouth. Your recovery is a bit slow. This doesn't match the resounding reputation of the Thunder Dominion. I have reason to suspect that you did something in secret. Staring at Zhou Lei's eyes, Master Yin suddenly lifted a hand and tapped between his eyebrows. A lightning rune appeared, flashed, and then shattered. Zhou Lei's body twitched. His complexion paled and blood flowed out from every orifice of his head. Humph humph, you really aren't honest. Just a little bit more, and you would have been able to condense this lightning rune. Master Yun coldly sneered. The master of the Thunder Dominion is very strong. I cannot provoke him right now, so this is the last time. Otherwise, I will kill you. She turned around and swept her eyes over everyone. Then, she found a folded paper star on the Xian paper. Her complexion changed, and she spat out a mouthful of blood, soaking it. The paper star twitched several times before falling completely silent. Master Yin curled her lips. You people really do have many tricks up your sleeves. You've already reached this step, and yet you still haven't given up. But don't worry, I won't give you any chances. Of course, your treatment will be the same. I won't pursue the matter the first time, but the next time will be death. She suddenly smiled. All right, everyone, cheer up a bit. Don't look so sad. Let me say something to comfort you all. No one responded. In this situation, no one was in the mood to speak nonsense with her. Master Yin didn't care. She thought for a moment and said, Tell me a funny story. Really, it's very funny. Chapter 1197. A long time ago, a ship sailed into the endless sea. On the ship, there was an ambitious young man who hoped to use this opportunity to make a name for himself. He charged into the land of chaos. However, there had always been a huge gap between reality and ideals. Soon, he experienced what cruelty was. In a battle for treasures in a secret realm, all the cultivators who traveled with him died. He was the only one who escaped with serious injuries. Originally, the young man was destined to die in the extremely dangerous land of chaos in his current state. However, his luck was pretty good. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, he managed to enter a secret realm that had yet to be discovered. The young man was saved. A beautiful girl lived in the secret realm. She was kind and affectionate. She quickly fell in love with the young man who woke up. That was the happiest time of her lonely life. The two young men loved each other fiercely. They stayed together and talked about many things. But happy times eventually came to an end. The young man had family outside. He could not stay here forever. Before leaving, they made a promise. Within a year, the young man would activate the keepsake and have a girl find him. At that time, he would prepare everything. The two of them would be together forever, never to be separated again. The girl saw the young man off. Because of her help, the journey was smooth. Standing by the sea, the girl waved her hand until the young man disappeared into the horizon, never to be seen again. Then, she began to wait. Days passed. Even though she had felt lonely before, the girl had never felt time pass so slowly. But when she thought of the young man, she was motivated to persist. She thought that he must be preparing for the two of them to be together for a long time. Every time this happened, the girl felt happy and grateful to the world. She thanked the heavens for giving her life and sending the young man to her side so that she could feel love and be loved. When the 1-year agreement was about to arrive, the keepsake the girl handed over was finally activated. She took all of her belongings and embarked on the journey to find her lover without any reluctance. The journey was long. The girl made many jokes and encountered some troubles on her first trip, but she did not feel it was hard. She was motivated to see the young man soon. She crossed mountains, crossed rivers, and walked through swamps filled with poisonous gas. Finally, the girl arrived in front of a large mountain. The aura of the keepsake was here. It was the young man's home. When the two of them were talking before, the young man had described it to her. The girl suddenly felt apprehensive. She didn't know what she would face next. However, what happened next proved that she was thinking too much. The young man excitedly flew out of the mountain and held her in his arms. He had many family members, and they were all very close to her. When they looked at her, their gazes were filled with warmth and tolerance. 3 days later, under the blessings of all their relatives, they walked together. The young man personally put a pearl hairpin on her head and told her that this was the proof of their love and that she should never take it off again. That day was very lively. Even when night fell, the mountain was still brightly lit. Countless guests laughed and drank to their heart's content. The girl was sent to the bridal chamber. It was a brand new courtyard in a quiet valley. The young man told her that he had built it with his own hands. It was a home for the two of them. Sitting on the soft red brocade quilt and looking at the festive decorations in the room, the girl couldn't help but shed tears. Home. She thought that from today onwards, she would have a home. She would no longer be alone in this world. In the future, there would be someone to care for her, someone to accompany her until the end of time. The young man still hadn't arrived. He drank a lot of wine and was still entertaining guests in front. The faint noise constantly entered her ears. After a long time, when the girl felt that her eyes were a little dry, he finally came. The matron of honor let the young man lift the veil and filled their wine cups. With a face full of smiles, she blessed the new couple and drank the wine. Finally, it was quiet. The girl laid on the bed. She tried her best to open her eyes and fulfill her duty as a wife. But she was too sleepy. The young man whispered in her ear, "Go to sleep, go to sleep." Then she fell asleep in a sweet mood. This sleep was long and dark. She didn't know how much time had passed, but the girl was suddenly awakened by a sharp pain. She found herself still in the bridal chamber, but everything in front of her had changed. A huge black chain tightly locked her hands, feet, and neck. A long iron drill was now deeply pierced in her chest, piercing through her heart. And now, the one who held the other end of the iron drill, personally pierced it in, was the young man she loved deeply. But at this time, he was very cold. His eyes fell on her body, without the slightest bit of warmth. The girl couldn't help but shiver. Besides the young man, there were many other people in the room. She had seen most of them before, but at this time, their gentle and friendly smiles had all turned into indifference. Deep in their eyes, there was a greedy desire that made her feel fear. She struggled with all her might, but the phoenix hairpin on her head was like a cold, venomous snake, nailing her life gate and scattering all her strength. It was a dark experience without any light. It was so dark that the girl didn't want to remember it, so her mind was a blur. She could only remember those cold faces eating the flesh and blood that was cut from her body. As they chewed, blood splashed out, making the smiles on those faces look even more terrifying. That's right. When the two of them were deeply in love, the girl had personally held the young man's fingers and gently stroked her head, telling him that this was her weakest place. This was probably what she had done to herself. But in the end, a year had passed, and the girl was in a period of rapid growth. Although a short year wasn't enough for her to repair the flaw in her life gate, it wasn't like before. Once she was restrained, she wouldn't lose all resistance. Although she was constantly injured, her strength was slowly restored. Finally, on a stormy night, amidst the roars of thunder, she suddenly reached out and grabbed the hand that was cutting off her flesh. According to the young man, the woman in front of her should be his big sister. The two of them were already married, so this was also her big sister. The girl grabbed her hand and said in a soft voice, "Big sister, you've eaten so much of my flesh this past year that doesn't taste good. I've really tired you out. Please rest for a moment." The panic-stricken woman opened her mouth as if she wanted to scream. But before she could make a single sound, her entire body disintegrated. That's right, the word disintegrate was extremely appropriate here. The strength that rampaged through her body instantly turned her big sister into a pile of broken flesh and bones that fell to the ground. The girl clenched her fingers, and a scarlet aura flew out from her broken flesh and bones, condensing into a ball in her palm. These people didn't know what she was. Although they ate her flesh and blood, they weren't able to refine it into their own strength. Once she regained her freedom, all she needed was a single thought, and the strength that fused into their bodies would instantly backfire on them. Heavy rain poured down. The girl pushed open the door. This was the first time she had left the bridal chamber since entering it. She was still in that tranquil mountain valley. A gentle breeze stirred up the cold moisture, blowing her hair. Her hair was as red as blood. Walking into the rain, her entire body was instantly soaked. Soon, some people discovered the woman who had escaped. But in front of her, these people who had eaten her flesh and blood simply didn't have the strength to resist. With just a glance, They all fell to the same fate as their big sister. So, more and more scarlet aura condensed in the woman's hand. It didn't grow in size, but its color became increasingly rich. It was like a blood-red eye that had opened its eyes for the first time, wanting to clearly see this cruel and ridiculous world. One after another, the people who had once appeared in front of her and brought her pain and suffering fell down. The courtyard that was covered by the heavy rain became a silent purgatory. The girl walked through every corner in the rain. When she killed 10 people, she finally saw the young man she loved. In the curtain of rain, in the pitch-black night, she stood in the courtyard. Her gaze passed through the window and fell on 2 figures in the room. The young man held a beautiful woman in his arms. His palm gently rested on her slightly protruding belly, and he whispered something into her ear. The woman in his arms smiled incomparably brightly. Her entire face exuded a light that could be called joy and happiness. Is this his wife? Then what am I? The girl quietly thought for a moment. In the end, she couldn't figure it out. So she pushed open the door and walked in, dripping with rain. The young man revealed a panicked expression. He spoke loudly, trying to warn the others in the courtyard. In fact, he succeeded. There was the sound of hurried footsteps, accompanied by suppressed roars. The humid air that had been soaked in the rain was filled with an oppressive atmosphere. They had already discovered those people who had disappeared. The girl reached out a hand and opened her fingers towards the door. Those people who had rushed over all had looks of fear on their faces. Then large blossoms of blood bloomed in the air. The thick smell of blood caused the pregnant woman to vomit. The young man's face was deathly pale. Despair filled the depths of his eyes. He tried to beg for mercy, but he couldn't answer the girl's question. Just who was she? Just this one question was enough to cut off all of his desire to try and live. He trembled as he knelt on the ground. The young man kowtowed again and again, saying that the child was innocent. He hoped that she could spare the pregnant woman. There was no answer. In truth, this was also a kind of answer. The girl closed her eyes and opened them again. She lifted a hand and pulled out the bead hairpin in her hair. I will return the thing you gave me to you today. She leaned over and stared into the young man's eyes. She slowly stabbed the bead hairpin into his chest, just like when he stabbed her in the beginning. The young man fell to the ground in pain. His body disintegrated inch by inch. Even as he died, he stared at the girl, his eyes filled with pleading. The pregnant woman's eyes widened. All of her happiness had been destroyed in a short period of time. She howled and rushed forwards like she had gone mad. The girl lifted her hand. Power gushed out from the air, grabbing the pregnant woman's neck and lifting her up. I can agree to your request and forgive this woman and the child, but I will put a curse on your bloodline. No matter how many reincarnations she has to go through, she will live in pain for eternity until the end of time. Then, she pulled the pregnant woman closer. Her other hand reached out, her fingertip falling between the pregnant woman's eyebrows. The scarlet aura crazily poured into her body through her finger, fusing with the fetus in her belly. Leaving the crazy pregnant woman behind, the girl left in the heavy rain. She returned to the deep place of the endless sea, to the home that she thought she would never return to. Master Yin suddenly snapped her fingers, smiling. How about this story? My conclusion isn't wrong, right? It's really funny. Grabbing the stack of papers, her smile became brighter. So, girls, you must learn to protect yourself. Especially, you can't easily trust others. Otherwise, you will only suffer losses. He bit her neck, swallowed for a while, and then threw her away. This bit of blood is my reward for my advice. You should recover quickly. I will come back to find you later. Don't be so delicate that you can't breathe after a few breaths. Your story isn't finished. The sword cultivator suddenly spoke. His appearance was miserable, but his expression was calm. Master Yin glanced at him. Then, I'll have to trouble you to add on. The sword cultivator was silent for several breaths. After the girl returned home, she discovered that her existence had been exposed. The saint had chosen her as a prey. Unwilling to be destroyed, she had been preparing in silence. She had spent many years to create a nearly perfect trap. She faked her death to deceive everyone and then borrowed the power left outside to resurrect. The taciturn sword cultivator had said so much in a single breath. It was truly rare. As his voice fell, even the sound of breathing disappeared from the air. Master Yun's smile faded. You are a smart person, but this is one of the labels I dislike the most. She walked to the sword cultivator, grabbing his arm and pulling it. The sound of bones cracking arose. His entire arm was torn off. The sword cultivator fell on the ground with beads of sweat on his forehead. His body shivered unceasingly. Master Yin brought his arm to her mouth, biting and chewing slowly. As the blood surged, she said, "This is a warning to you. Remember to restrain yourself. Don't act so smart." People weren't stupid. Of course, they understood that the main character of the story that Master Yun had spent a lot of time to tell was herself. To be exact, it was the nature of the spirit body in the middle realm, and she was the power that the spirit body had injected into the pregnant woman's body to fuse with the baby. Her bloodline had been passed down from generation to generation until now. No wonder why Master Yun, who had entered the middle realm with them and was one step ahead of them, would appear in this place as a stranger. Everything had an explanation. Master Yin suddenly smiled. You little fellows are all as shrewd as a fox, but it's a pity that there's no reward for guessing correctly here. She took a deep breath and then slowly exhaled. Forget it. If I say it, then I say it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. After all, everyone has a time when they were young and blind. She grabbed the spear cultivator half-step, Saint Disciple, and bit down. Gulp, 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 gulp sounds echoed in the silence. But this time, it was clear that something was wrong. This cultivator was on the verge of death. His eyes rolled back and his body twitched. But Master Yin didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. The fear that had calmed down suddenly surged into everyone's hearts. Their eyes widened in panic. Pa! Master Yin tossed the shriveled corpse to the ground. Facing everyone's panic-stricken eyes, she smiled and said, I thought about it and decided to send you on your way as soon as possible. Otherwise, you might suffer a loss. After all, you know too much. Hearing these words, even in such a situation, the 5 cultivators couldn't help but curse in their hearts. How shameless. You were the one who said it. If you didn't want to, do you think we could force you in our current state? Chapter 1198. Whether or not they cared about face wasn't important. Moreover, they were just food on the chopping block that would soon be eaten, so they didn't have the qualifications to judge them. Master Yun could feel the anger and annoyance in their eyes. But what did it matter? After all, looks were the most powerless thing in this world. But there was one point that Master Yin wasn't wrong. Although these youths were currently being played around in the palm of her hand and had no strength to resist, she didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. These were cultivators that came from the saint's tutelage, who knew what other unknown things they might have in their hands. In order to win the trust of these people and conceal themselves from the saint's thoughts, the mummified Master Yin had indeed weakened to the extreme. She was like a dried-up lump of mud. If she were struck by a slightly greater force, she would shatter into countless pieces. In order to smoothly revive, she had to prepare a sufficient source of fresh and powerful blood for herself. Thus, there was a house that resembled breeding insects. Its only function was to pick out the most formidable cultivators. Once they ate the spirit body and used their own strength to catalyze the birth of a treasure, the contract would automatically take effect and they would become puppets under her control. Master Yin didn't worry that these cultivators would constantly become stronger, because everything they had was destined to be swallowed up by her in the end. And now, it was time to end all of this. She had already smoothly revived and restored some of her strength. There was no need for her to pursue the greatest benefits. She would kill off these cultivators in front of her and eliminate any future troubles. She would leave the endless sea and continue living with a new identity. Qin Yu knew that he couldn't wait any longer. It definitely wasn't because he wanted to save these 5 people, but it was clear that with every cultivator she swallowed, Master Yun would become stronger. Thus, As Master Yin walked towards the stack of papers, and the woman's eyes widened in horror and despair, Qin Yu pushed open the darkness. The clear sound of his footsteps instantly spread into everyone's ears. Master Yin turned her head and stared at Qin Yu, who was walking out from the darkness. Her expression was unexpectedly calm. "You really are still alive," Qin Yu said. "You seem to already know." Master Yin didn't answer this question. "You came out now to stop me from killing them." Qin Yu nodded. "Although I have no obligation to do so, it is necessary. They cannot be eaten by you." Yin Shi smiled. "Are you that confident that you can save them?" Qin Yu flipped his hand, and a lump of iron appeared in his palm. It rapidly turned crimson red, as if magma were roaring within. "I have it." Crimson rays of light shot out like countless arrows, tearing apart the darkness around them. Thus, the true scene of this space appeared in front of everyone. It was a giant, translucent furnace floating in the darkness. Previously, the darkness that filled this place had seeped in through the furnace. It was also this darkness that blocked the probing of the saint's will, causing everyone to disappear from their senses. Yin Shi retracted his smile as he glared at the lump of metal in Qin Yu's hand. "Qin Yu, if not for this, I would have already killed you. But I'm still alive. Moreover, I know that this thing should have enough strength to destroy you." Qin Yu spread out his 5 fingers. The iron lump floated in the air, constantly emitting humming sounds. The eyes of the 5 cultivators who had just escaped death lit up at the same time. "Qin Yu, kill her. Kill her, don't hesitate. Hurry up." Qin Yu was expressionless. He didn't even glance at them, not moving in the slightest. Yin Shi's lips curved up. "Why don't you do anything?" Qin Yu said. "You know that I can kill you, yet you remain so calm. Things can't be so simple." Yin Shi smiled. "You are truly worthy of being my big brother, Qin. Out of everyone here, you are the smartest." She paused. "I can give you an answer, but before that, I want you to answer me a question. What did you discover that I was awake?" Qin Yu said, "After it was activated." Yin Shi looked into his eyes. "You're not telling the truth." Qin Yu remained indifferent. Yin Shi said, "If you don't want to tell me, then don't. Who doesn't have some secrets?" She lifted a hand and pointed at the furnace where everyone was. "For instance, this thing was in the endless sea from the start. I don't know who it belongs to or how it came to be here, but it is very effective. Not even the saints can penetrate it. That is why I was able to smoothly conceal it." He lifted a finger and pointed at Qin Yu. "That thing in your hand is, strictly speaking, the fire source of this furnace. But it is a great harm to me, so I sealed it away a long time ago and tossed it in an obscure corner. I never imagined that it would fall into your hands and even be activated by your blood. This is probably fate." Qin Yu lightly said, "The important point." Yin Shi's lips curved up. "The important point is that after you stimulate its strength, you can indeed kill me. But at the same time, you will also activate this slumbering furnace. Qin Yu, since you have been hiding in the darkness this entire time, you should have already seen the complete appearance of the residence I arranged. It was constructed using this furnace as a blueprint, but its strength is far from being comparable to the furnace itself." Qin Yu frowned. "You are saying that if this furnace is activated, all of us will die?" Yin Shi clapped her hands together. "That's right. That is the situation. I know you won't easily believe me, but you'll know once you try." The corners of her lips curled up even higher. "Or perhaps you've already sensed that something's wrong. After all, it's your blood that has activated the fire source of this furnace. You should be able to sense it more clearly than us." Qin Yu fell silent, and this silence undoubtedly indicated that Yin Shi was right. The eyes of the cultivators brightened, and their complexions immediately changed. The reason was simple. Qin Yu held that lump of metal in his hand and possessed the strength to kill Yin Shi. But doing so would activate the furnace and cause everyone to perish together. This was the same as perishing together with the enemy. Unless he had no other choice, Qin Yu would never use it. In other words, as long as Yin Shi didn't attack Qin Yu, the chances of him doing so were minuscule. In that case, if they were in Master Yun's shoes, what would they do? Just thinking about it caused their hearts to sink. Perhaps they could tempt Qin Yu with great benefits, as long as he was willing to stand idly by. At that time, they would still be meat on the chopping block. He could chop them up however he wanted and come up with all sorts of tricks. Most importantly, the cultivators discovered to their dismay that it wasn't too difficult for Yinshi to do this. What should they do? Before the cultivators could think of a solution, Yinshi spoke up. Her first words caused their hearts to sink to the bottom of the valley. Qin Yu, let's cooperate. Qin Yu, don't listen to her. If she can save us, we will definitely repay her generously. Xianji shouted, not bothering with pride. But the only response she got was Yunshi's undisguised ridicule. Save you? After knowing so much, if I let you leave alive, I will die, and I will die a miserable death. Since that's the case, why don't we go together? That way, we can accompany each other in hell. Xianji's breath caught in her throat, and anger appeared in her eyes. She suddenly discovered that this was indeed the case. If Qin Yu wanted to save them, Yinshi would definitely stop him at all costs. Even if they were to die together, she wouldn't allow them to leave alive. The 5 cultivators, who weren't fools, finally came to a realization. The reason why Yinshi had rambled on so much wasn't because she was a chatterbox. Rather, she had already predicted a certain possibility and decided to cut off their escape route. Qin Yu was well aware of the current situation, and he knew that what she said was true. If he did that, he would definitely cut off any hope of saving them. This was because saving them would be equivalent to driving Yinshi crazy and dragging everyone down with her. Since she didn't want to save them, he might as well go with the flow and use the 5 of them who were destined to die to make a deal with Yinshi. Moreover, in the eyes of the sages, they were already dead. Even if they were to be killed now, there wouldn't be any trouble. The more they thought about it, the more panicked they became. Yinshi swept her mocking gaze over the 5 before landing on Qin Yu. Her tone turned gentle. Big brother Qin, if you hadn't stepped in to save me, I would have already died. Thus, no matter who I am now, I owe you a favor. Qin Yu sneered coldly. So, you want to kill me because you owe me a favor? Yinshi frowned. She couldn't help but feel a little regretful for being too rash back then. Now that she thought about it, the reason why Qin Yu suddenly left was probably because he sensed danger and chose to flee in advance. If he had been a little more cautious, he might have already been killed. There would have been no need for him to stir up so much trouble. Before she could organize her words, Qin Yu interrupted her with a wave of his hand. Cut the crap. If I didn't stop you, what would I have gotten out of it? Not stopping him meant watching from the sidelines. The faces of the 5 cultivators warped in horror, and their hearts sank to the bottom. The situation that they were most worried about had finally appeared. Xianji shrieked, Qin Yu, if you dare to work with her, my master will never let you off. Ruan Jing, Ling Xiao, Zhou Lei, and Wang Hun cursed her for being a fool in their hearts. Was she trying to kill herself by saying such things now? As expected, Qin Yu shot her a cold glance and said, Can you kill them without leaving any traces behind? Yinshi smiled. Of course. Don't worry, big brother Qin. If I kill them in this cauldron, even the sages won't be able to sense it. After a slight pause, she continued, As for the benefits that big brother Qin mentioned, the name human pearl is quite appropriate, so I'll just call it that. I won't eat the 5 of them. I'll just kill them and condense them into human pearls for big brother Qin. Qin Yu laughed in anger. Yinshi, do you think I'm that stupid? I'll never touch human pearls. Yinshi said, Big brother Qin, there's no need to be angry. Since I've made this promise, I'll naturally take back the secret door and turn the human pearls into pure, powerful treasures that will aid in your cultivation. Of course, I'll only be at ease if you agree to eat the human pearls. Big brother Qin, you won't tell anyone about what happened today. Qin Yu's complexion was cloudy and uncertain, a burning heat in his eyes. He was well aware of the effects of the mortal bead, not to mention that these 5 cultivators were all peak powerhouses who had swallowed a massive number of mortal beads. If he killed them, the quality of the human pearls they formed would naturally be shockingly high. After absorbing them, his strength would surely rise dramatically. Yin Shi's smile widened. Big brother Qin, this is the best choice for both of us. Why hesitate? Qin Yu looked up, his eyes blazing. Yin Shi, if you dare to play any tricks on me, I'll immediately detonate the fire source and kill you. Yin Shi said, I know big brother Qin's strength, so how could I dare to have any other thoughts? You can rest assured. After a moment of hesitation, he said, however, in order to dissolve the secret door hidden within the human pearls, we'll need to sign a cooperation contract. As long as you and I become a part of the contract, the secret door will naturally be ineffective against you. Qin Yu clenched his fist. How do we sign the contract? Yin Shi said, it's simple. All you need to do is put our palms together and leave the rest to me. Big brother Qin, rest assured. You control the furnace's fire source, so I won't dare to take any risks. Qin Yu sneered. I don't think you dare. Come. He stretched out his hand and placed his palms together with Yin Shi's. In the instant that their palms came into contact with one another, Yin Shi looked at Qin Yu and smiled. Big brother Qin, I'm afraid you don't know that spirits are born from the heavens and earth, and their souls are endless, right? Otherwise, how could you dare to come into contact with me? Qin Yu's face was filled with anger. In the next moment, his body stiffened. At the same time, Yin Shi's body slumped to the ground. When the two touched, her soul had already entered Qin Yu's body through their palms. Spirits were born from the heavens and earth, and Yin Shi's soul was different from all other living beings in the world. She possessed all sorts of terrifying abilities. Assimilating souls and transforming them into a part of one's own soul was what she was best at. But this time, as soon as she entered, before Yin Shi could do anything, she felt as if she was being bitten by a vicious mouth. Just a single bite nearly tore her soul in two. Fear and pain assaulted her heart at the same time, causing her to scream in pain. In the next moment, her consciousness was forcefully extracted from her soul and reappeared in Qin Yu's mind. Qin Yu's expression was calm. He looked at Yin Shi, who was tightly bound by the black chains, without joy or sorrow in his eyes. Although he had made up his mind from the start, if Yin Shi didn't have the intention to harm him, she wouldn't have fallen into the hands of the old turtle so easily. What is this? What is this thing? Scram! Yin Shi frantically struggled, but unfortunately, it was all in vain. What a fiery little girl. I like her a lot. The old turtle was so overjoyed that he was about to go crazy. Thank you, Master, for saving me. From now on, I will fight wherever you want me to. As he spoke, the black chains tightened around Yin Shi, locking her in place. She glared at Qin Yu, her eyes filled with hatred. Qin Yu spread out his hands. You barged in here yourself, so how can you blame me? You should know that I was very sincere in cooperating with you from the start. Yin Shi, like hell I'll believe you. There really isn't a single good man in this world. Chapter 1199. Qin Yu, consider yourself fierce, but don't think that just because you've suppressed my consciousness that you've won. Yin Shi clenched her teeth, her eyes cold and callous. If I cannot restore the connection to my mortal body, I will immediately lose control of my strength. At that time, there will be a loud bang, and no one will be able to escape. Qin Yu clapped his hands in praise. To describe you as a wily old fox is truly fitting. But even if you can blow yourself up, I fear you still won't be able to kill me. Moreover, I don't think you will have the chance to do so. As he spoke, he snapped his fingers. On the other side, Yin Shi, who was being entangled by the old turtle, suddenly paled. The connection between her and her mortal body had been severed. How could this be? Qin Yu said, I fear you have forgotten. In order to avoid a bloodline backlash that would have taken your life, I once branded the dark moon and crimson sun into your body. Afterwards, I forgot to take the back. Now that I have imprisoned your mortal body, it is the perfect time. Qin Yu, Yin Shi screamed. You cannot kill me, you cannot. Without expression, Qin Yu said, Of course I can. The old turtle angrily roared. If I don't kill you, how can I continue living? This is your fate. Just obediently accept it. The black chains tightened, gradually sinking in her body. The hatred on Yunshi's face finally turned into panic. She had spent countless years plotting and scheming, and now she finally saw the hope of a new life. How could she be willing to die like this? Qingyu, don't kill me. As long as you let me live. As Yunshi spoke to her, her lips trembled and she fell silent. She could clearly feel the indifference in Qinyu's eyes. This shattered the last shred of hope in her heart. Why? Yunshi whispered. I am a pure and honest person. I have never done anything that harms the heavens or harms reason while cultivating in the endless sea. Just because I tried to save someone out of compassion, I ended up being deceived, imprisoned, tortured, and eaten. I was lucky enough to return to the endless sea alive, but I was targeted by a group of greedy saints. I became their prey. I'm not willing, of course I'm not willing. Since the heavens and earth gave birth to me, why did they give me such a tragic fate? She suddenly lifted her head, her voice becoming sharp and resentful. I want to live, but all my plans and preparations are in vain. Qingyu, I curse you with the identity of the spirit of the endless sea. You'll have to face its endless pursuit until the last drop of your blood is drained. Your flesh and blood will be divided and devoured, and your soul will perish. Fate, this is my fate. Today, I will accept it. Crack after crack appeared on Yunshi's body before it shattered into innumerable pieces and vanished without a trace. In the end, she chose to disperse her consciousness and ended her life. This was probably Yunshi's final stand against the world. Even if she had to die by his hands. Qingyu frowned. Following Master Yun's death, he suddenly felt an extremely cold and sinister energy fusing with his aura. When he tried to sense it again, he didn't discover anything. But he was well aware that this was the curse that Master Yun had placed on him before she died. Indeed, in this world, there were no gains for no reason. There were gains and losses. Since he chose to kill Master Yun, he had to bear the consequences of his actions. The old turtle cautiously said, Master, you have been cursed. Qingyu was speechless for a second. Do I need you to remind me of what has happened to me? Feeling Qinyu's dissatisfaction, the old turtle dryly coughed. In truth, I wanted to remind Master that this curse is the fiercest of blood curses. It is the kind that bites you before you die, and it is the most poisonous of poisons. There is basically no cure for it. You must be careful from now on. All life forms in the endless sea will treat you like you have killed their parents. Qinyu's lips twitched. This old turtle was a terrible description, but he couldn't help but pay attention to it. He was clearly worried that Qingyu would vent his anger on him, so he gave him a warning ahead of time. Forget it. Since things had already come to this, there was no point in thinking too much about it. He could only deal with the situation as it came. Even the wily spirit body had been blown up by him, so why would he need to fear the shrimp soldiers and crab generals of the endless sea? Now, this was indeed what Qingyu thought. Moreover, he didn't place this curse in his eyes at all. But soon he would understand what it meant to not fear death and what it meant to be an ant biting an elephant to death. Moreover, in a place like the endless sea, there were indeed many shrimp soldiers and crab generals. But they were absolutely different from what he knew. Let's not talk about the future. Shua. Qingyu opened his eyes. He instantly felt a trace of gloomy coldness and ill intent. It was soul-hooking. Seeing Qingyu wake up, his eyes flashed, and he lowered his head. He sneered inwardly. One ungrateful wretch. He had just saved his life, but now that he saw Qingyu fall into Master Yun's trap, he suddenly had devious thoughts. If he hadn't woken up in time, he feared soul-hooking would have done something. Originally, Qingyu was a bit hesitant about how to deal with the 5 cultivators in front of him that were still alive. He didn't fear killing them, but who knew if these people in front of him had some special method to mark the murderer or something like that. If he killed them all, that would be a simple and straightforward solution. But if he provoked several incomparably terrifying saints, then he would likely have to spend the rest of his days on the run. And the key point was that he might not even be able to escape. But even if he didn't kill them, just the fact that their spiritual bodies had fallen into his hands was enough to make Chinyu suffer. This was originally a difficult choice to make. Chinyu was still considering the pros and cons, but that soul-hooking's gaze just now caused him to think of another method. His thoughts raced as he thought over the situation. Then, a cold light flashed in Chinyu's eyes. He had already given them a path, so it was fine if they left. Otherwise, they couldn't blame him for being ruthless and leaving them here. The moment Chinyu woke up, the attention of the 5 living cultivators fell onto him. They certainly understood the current situation. When it came to their own life and death, these people definitely considered things more comprehensively than Chinyu. They certainly knew what his current concerns were. Zhou Lei said in a low voice, "Brother Qin, I can make a solemn oath that I will not reveal anything that happened today. If I violate this oath, I will die a violent death." "That's right, Chinyu, you saved us, so we definitely won't repay kindness with enmity." Stack Paper's words were sincere. This was a close disciple of half-sage Stacking Kite. After experiencing life and death terror after terror, he no longer had any arrogance left in him. The situation was clear. Master Cloud had died. Their life and death now depended on a single thought from Chinyu. But what was sad was that the situation they faced didn't change for the better at all. This was because Chinyu had ample reason to kill them and eliminate any future troubles. In this situation, what was there to be arrogant about? It wasn't easy for them to survive. Soul Hooking was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Chinyu, if you save us today, we will forget about you killing the descendants of Sly Fate." "Oh, forget about it?" Chinyu suddenly said. "Are you serious?" Soul Hooking said, "Of course." Chinyu said, "I don't believe you." Soul Hooking. If it weren't for the fact that he was in an absolutely weakened state right now, he swore he would have pounced on Chinyu and taught him a lesson. If he didn't believe him, then what the hell was he talking about? Were you playing with him? His strength was recovering at a speed faster than he imagined. This was likely because he had used a massive number of treasures before this. With every moment that passed, his strength would increase. No matter how annoyed Soul Hooking was, he wouldn't choose to fall out with Chinyu right now. Didn't you want to talk nonsense? Then speak as much as you can. Once I recover, I will immediately let you know what it means to say that the more you talk, the more you die. Soul Hooking took a deep breath. His voice was extremely sincere. "Chinyu, how can I make you believe me? I do want to live. As long as you save us, you can state any condition you want." Chinyu suddenly laughed. But his words weren't funny at all. "Are you saying so much? Are you deliberately stalling for time? I know that your strength is rapidly recovering, but believe me, the speed of your recovery is not as fast as the speed at which I make my decision." After a brief pause, he swept his eyes over the several people. "You are all disciples of a saint, and I don't want to stir up any more trouble, so I can spare your lives. But I need a guarantee that those who are still alive will stand with me and never betray me. Do you understand what I mean?" Soul Hooking suddenly felt that something wasn't right. Chinyu's words sounded normal. So why did he feel a chill in his heart? Puff! With a dull sound, the Skypiercer sword cultivator attacked. At some unknown time, he had condensed a powerful sword intent that tore open a massive hole in Soul Hooking's chest. And at almost the same time, Ruan Jing reached out a hand. As blood splashed out, he forcefully dug out Soul Hooking's left eyeball. The eyeball that was clenched tightly in his 5 fingers twitched madly. Then, he exerted force and crushed it into powder. "Ah!" Soul Hooking screamed. "If you dare to kill me, the Sly Life Clan will never let you off." After the Skypiercer sword cultivator attacked, he retreated to where he was. His complexion paled. It was clear that the sword strike just now had affected his injuries. Ruan Jing gasped for breath. He glanced at Chinyu and then at Zhou Lei and Xianji. "What are you two waiting for? Are you hoping that Brother Qin will send you on your way?" This was proof of their allegiance. It was also their only choice to survive. Zhou Lei and Xianji stiffened. Relatively speaking, although these two people were intelligent, One was too upright, and the other didn't understand the world, so their reactions were a bit slow. But looking at the silent Chinyu, how could they not understand just what had happened? Chinyu had already given them a choice. They would attack together and kill Soul Hooking. If the four of them survived, they would be on the same boat as him. If anyone dared to betray him, they would be hunted down by the Sly Life clan to the end. Bang! With a loud clap of thunder, Zhou Lei's eyes turned purple. He opened his mouth and spat out a bolt of lightning that struck Soul Hooking, instantly charring him. Soul Hooking fell to the ground. At this time, he couldn't even scream. Struggling at death's door, he could only glare at Chinyu with hatred in his eyes. Soul Hooking certainly knew that the reason he had fallen to this state was all because of Chinyu. And more importantly, it was impossible for him to survive, so there was no need for him to hide his true emotions. It was true that Xianji was a woman, but when a woman was ruthless, that was what was truly terrifying. Without hesitation, she cut off Soul Hooking's neck. His head rolled around, and she picked him up. Everyone, you and I are well aware of the abilities of the Sly Life clan. Since we have killed Soul Hooking, if you don't want to be hunted down, then cooperate with me to seal his soul and seal his life. We must bury the truth of his death. Of course, no one objected to this proposal. Looking at the four cultivators gathered together, Chinyu smiled. Killing someone was indeed the most effective and fastest way to solve a problem. Its advantage was that it was done once and for all, but whether or not there would be any residual effects depended on who was killed and one's own luck. Soul Hooking wasn't easy to kill, but the harder it was to kill him, the stronger the alliance formed after killing him would be. To Chinyu, this was the best result. Sealing his soul and sealing his life was difficult, but concealing it from the senses of a saint was even more difficult. With Soul Hooking status in the Sly Life clan, his death would inevitably draw the attention of the Soul Hooking clan's half-saint. Fortunately, the ones who did this were four cultivators under the command of a half-saint. In particular, this woman Xianji had a stack of paper on her body. She didn't explain, but there were traces of ink on these pieces of paper that were pieced together. Every stroke, every twist and turn, released an incomparably powerful aura that left one's heart racing. The only bad thing was that the words on the paper were a bit too ugly. Although there were only a few missing strokes, they could still be seen. To be able to pour such a powerful aura into the words written on the paper, one could only achieve the great Tao and become a supreme saint. So it turned out that the legendary half-saint Stacking Iris, who loved to read and excelled in the four arts, had actually written such ugly words. Legends really couldn't be trusted. Xianji swept her eyes over the four cultivators. Her complexion was a bit ugly. She clenched her teeth and said, "I'm warning you. You had best keep this matter to yourself. If my teacher finds out, silencing you will be the lightest punishment." Half-Saint Stacking Iris's words were like scribbles. Once this matter spread out, his image would immediately collapse. Thinking back to the occasional words he had heard from his own saint, Half-Saint Stacking Iris wasn't a broad-minded person at all. Of course, it was normal for women to be narrow-minded. If they were to be held to the standards of men, that would be too excessive. But when this woman was a half-saint, things were different. There really was a chance someone could die. Cough, cough, forget. He absolutely had to forget. This matter was just like killing Hook Soul. He had to pretend it had never happened. She stuck the paper all over Hook Soul's body. Xianji bit her finger and looked up at the three people beside her. "Don't just stand there and play dumb. It's impossible for me to do this alone." Ruan Jing bitterly smiled. She was the second to bite her finger. The sword cultivator Skypiercer flicked his finger and a blood sword flew out. Zhou Lei coughed several times. He looked at Chinyu and then back at him. Chinyu lightly said, "Stop looking. I won't donate blood no matter how much you look." To speak so bluntly and still be able to restrain herself from falling out with him, this was certainly a skill. The four second-generation cultivators bled together, dyeing the paper red. Like glue, it firmly stuck to Hook Soul's corpse. "Burn!" Xianji shouted out. The blood-stained paper instantly ignited, burning Hook's soul's corpse to ashes. Chapter 1200. As for the head part, it was the sword cultivator who had struck himself several times in the chest. Only then was he able to spit out a mouthful of blood. The moment the blood left his body, it was shattered into a bloody fog by a powerful sword intent, because within this blood, there really was a transparent sword shadow. Life Sword, Xianji, Ruanjing, and Zhou Lei's complexions changed. They thought that this was truly worthy of being the peerless sword Dao genius that only appeared once every 10,000 years in the Heavenly Sword sect. At such a young age, he had actually managed to cultivate his life sword. Then, they all let out long breaths of relief. The life sword of the Heavenly Sword sect was not something that the so-called life swords of the various sword sects could compare with. With this life sword, even if a saint were to lock down the heavens, they wouldn't be able to sense anything wrong. Puff! With a muffled sound, the transparent sword shadow sank into the Soul Reaper's skull. Green smoke rose from the 7 orifices of his head at the same time. This was a phenomenon caused by the complete destruction of his soul. To erase it from the world without leaving a single trace was a safer method than sealing his soul. Even if the Sly Fate clan had the ability to summon remnant souls and extract information from the fragments, now that his soul had been destroyed, he was destined to obtain nothing. Hu Qi! Hu Qi! The sword cultivator fell to the ground, gasping for breath. His face was pale, without the slightest hint of blood. He was already extremely weak and had been repeatedly hammered by Master Yin. Now that he had forcefully activated his life sword, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Zhou Lei flipped his hand and took out something. This is a healing item from my Thunder Dominion. Brother Ling, you might be able to use it. Tong Tian's sword cultivator glanced at him, took the medicine, and swallowed it. This decisiveness left Zhou Lei stunned for a moment before he smiled. Ruan Jing whispered, "Aren't you afraid of poison? Sword cultivators really are brainless." Zhou Lei sneered. The black-hearted scholar of Xiangzhang Academy has always called himself a gentleman, but he always has the heart of a villain. How laughable! Xian Ji straightened herself. "I will warn you once more. Remember my warning and don't say anything you shouldn't say." She glanced at the sword cultivator, who looked much better. She reached out a hand. "Give me one, too." Zhou Lei's face stiffened. "I don't think your injuries are too serious. This thing is actually quite precious." "I don't have much." Xianji was expressionless. "You may think that my injuries aren't serious, but I'm actually holding on. If you're sure that you need it, I can immediately show you my weakness." This was a little too ruthless. He had already made up his mind to learn how to be a thick-skinned and black-hearted person so that he could live longer in the future. However, this was clearly not a goal that could be achieved in a short period of time. Zhou Lei smiled bitterly and gave a piece of Xian paper. Then, he immediately glared at Ruan Jing. "Don't say any more. I only have 3 of these. I want to save one to save a life at a critical moment." Ruan Jing took out a jade gourd from her bosom, opened it, and drank a mouthful. "My Xiangzhang Academy is rich and overbearing, and we have no lack of life-saving items. You should keep your treasures for yourself." After saying that, he paused and glanced at Zhou Lei. "Do you understand the principle of not flaunting your wealth? If you want to learn to be an outstanding person, you still have a long way to go." After experiencing life and death together, and even killing people together, these 4 cultivators of a certain generation had inexplicably become closer to each other. Of course, there were genuine changes in their moods, but there was also no lack of deliberate actions. After all, after today, they would have a common secret and could just barely be divided into a small group. Qin Yu saw all of this with his eyes, but didn't have any intention of interfering. Whether they wanted to be close or not, it didn't matter to him as long as they could keep today's secret. Ruan Jing looked at the Xian paper and then at Zhou Lei. She felt that their conversation didn't seem to care about Qin Yu's feelings, but she couldn't find a suitable topic to talk about. She could only say, "Brother Qin, there is something I need to remind you of." After leaving the endless sea, it is best that you leave immediately and don't stop. Then, before you're strong enough, don't move around alone. Qin Yu frowned. What do you mean? Wan Jing's eyebrows jumped up. She thought, don't you know what you've done? I'm just trying to find something to talk about in consideration of your feelings. But Qin Yu didn't understand. In a situation where he couldn't afford to provoke them, he certainly had to answer. Not only did he answer, but he also answered in a comprehensive manner and had a good attitude. Ah, Brother Qin has a short memory. I'm afraid you don't remember, but before you entered the realm within the realm, when you sparred with Ling Xiao, you used the power of space. Although I saw it with my own eyes, every time I think about it, I am amazed. Brother Qin, with your cultivation, you have already grasped the rules of space. In the future, your potential will be limitless, and you may even step onto the saint realm. In terms of the importance of having a glib tongue, when two people fought to the death, the concept had been stolen and changed. Sparring. But that wasn't important. Qin Yu suddenly discovered that there was a high chance there was a problem with his understanding of things. For instance, the space laws. It seemed as though it was extraordinary. He took a deep breath and suppressed the restlessness in his heart. He said in a low voice, Ruan Jing, speak clearly. What is going on? Keep pretending, keep pretending. What's going on? Why do you have to use this method to make me praise you? Childish, this is far too childish. His heart was filled with disdain. He thought that Qin Yu seemed like a fierce person who gave off an unfathomable feeling. So how could he suddenly be like this? Could it be that all the pressure had been lifted and he had the upper hand, so he revealed his true nature? Thinking about it, how sad. I am the dignified Ruan Jing, and yet I have fallen into such a person's hands. I want to cry, but no tears will come out. Ruan Jing sighed inwardly and lamented his own fate. But a bright smile bloomed on his face. It looks like I was worrying too much. Brother Qin's cultivation is transcendent. There is no need for you to fear ordinary people. Even if a saint were to take action, there would be a great figure behind them to stop them. After all, for someone like Brother Qin, who has limitless prospects, even a saint would do their best to protect him. Did I praise you enough? Is it comfortable enough? How come you still have that gloomy frown on your face? Don't go too far. For better or worse, I am the dignified Ruan Jing of Xiangzhang Academy. For better or worse, I am someone with status. I really can't say anything more than that. Looking at the silent Qin Yu, Ruan Jing's expression stiffened. As he was considering whether or not to adjust his bottom line, Qin Yu suddenly said, Are you saying that a saint might attack me because of the space laws? What nonsense! With your acting skills, it would be a pity if you didn't win an award. How simple was this? It was obvious that it wasn't. So how could he have such a gloomy expression as if he had just learned some grievous news? Who was he trying to fool? That's right. If Qin Yu was trying to find a way to listen to him praise him, then that would make sense. After all, everyone had a heart of vanity. Moreover, Ruan Jing's flattery wasn't just any ordinary effect, but if he deliberately put on such an appearance as if he had just realized something, besides showing his ignorance, what use was there? Ruan Jing looked at Qin Yu and then at him. Of course, he wasn't like Zhou Lei, who had such ridiculous thoughts. Rather, he was carefully observing the emotions he revealed. Why did it feel like it was real? Ruan Jing's heart shrank. His expression froze, and he couldn't help but cry out inwardly, It can't be. Qin Yu really didn't know what the space laws represented. Heavens, could he be a native cultivator that jumped out from some remote corner of the world? But the problem was, when had he ever heard of a native cultivator that had always been labeled as a country bumpkin, arrogant, and laughable? Moreover, he had even grasped the space laws. Xianji and Zhou Lei couldn't help but widen their eyes. They looked at Qin Yu as if they were looking at an immortal god. Seeing Ruan Jing's stunned expression as if he had been struck by lightning, Xianji cautiously said, Fellow Taoist Qin, do you really not know what the space laws represent? Qin Yu glanced at her. I'll know once you tell me. At this time, Xianji couldn't help but think that if he was acting, then his acting skills were at the peak of perfection. If he wasn't, that would be a big joke. With a question and an answer, Xianji replaced Ruan Jing as he explained in detail what the space laws were and what they represented. He could not explain in detail because Qin Yu's questions were too serious. Everyone was infected by his seriousness and became nervous. So it turned out that the space laws also represented future growth potential. Even great figures that stepped into the saint realm weren't able to grasp them. Qin Yu had never felt such a pressing need for a way to obtain all sorts of cultivation news. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to make such a low-level mistake. In fact, he didn't even need to rush into the endless sea. As long as he lit up the space laws, there was a high chance he would be specially recruited and directly enter the Peach Blossom Spring. Of course, at that time, Qin Yu would have to be on guard against the Peach Blossom Spring Master having designs on the space laws. But now, he didn't have to worry about this. Instead, he had provoked an even greater problem for himself. It was clear that the spirit bodies in the endless sea had already been locked onto by many saints. As long as they weren't blind, they would definitely be able to sense the fluctuations of the space laws. And before he entered the realm within the mystic realm, there had been far too many people that had seen Qin Yu display the space laws. Even if the vast majority of them had died in the mystic realm, as long as one of them managed to leave alive, he would still be in deep trouble. Moreover, there were 4 of them right in front of him. Sensing Qin Yu's unfriendly gaze, Xianji quickly waved her hand. Fellow Taoist Qin, rest assured that we are all grasshoppers on the same rope. We definitely won't say anything. After all, if something happens to you, our fates won't be any better. This was true, but Qin Yu's complexion remained as gloomy and gloomy as before. It was as if a disaster had fallen from the heavens and just happened to smash into his head. Damn it! Ruan Jing had already regained his composure. As he listened to Qin Yu and Xianji's conversation and carefully watched his expression change, he finally confirmed something. It was true. Qin Yu really didn't know what the space laws meant. In fact, from his expression, he didn't seem to value them at all. He thought about how he had painstakingly fumbled about for these past years. With the help of the Academy's teachers, he had tried countless possibilities, but he had never been able to truly step into the great Tao of space. A mouthful of blood rushed to his throat, but he forcefully swallowed it back down. Steady, steady, I can't disgrace myself like this. Staring at Qin Yu, Ruan Jing's eyes turned a bit red. He really wanted to roar out loud. They were both men, so why were you so outstanding? Qin Yu wasn't in the mood to care about Ruan Jing, who was staring at him with reddened eyes and about to explode. He frowned and his thoughts raced. The 3 cultivators in front of him had no need to joke around with him. Moreover, looking at their expressions, it seemed they were even more surprised than he was. There was a high probability that was what had happened. In other words, in the eyes of these saints, he was nothing more than a little fellow who ran around recklessly with a gold ingot in his arms. In this situation, if he didn't fight for it, what was the point? To add food to someone else's bowl? Thinking about it from another's perspective, it wasn't hard to guess what the saints were thinking. Qin Yu's complexion became even uglier. Run, he had to run, and he had to be fast. If he were discovered by the saints, he would truly die without a grave. Now, Qin Yu could barely be considered a member of the higher cultivators. He certainly knew that the thoughts of these so-called lords were no different from those of ordinary people. As long as there were enough benefits, they would take action. Could things like face be eaten? Zhou Lei suddenly said, Brother Qin, in your current situation, running away is useless. Since the saints know of your existence, it is only a matter of time before they discover you. Looking into Qin Yu's eyes, he slowed down his words. Now, the only way to resolve this is for Brother Qin to find a sufficiently powerful backer for yourself as soon as possible. Someone so powerful that not even the saints can attack you without scruples. Of course, if Brother Qin comes from some powerful influence, then just pretend I didn't say anything. These last words were obviously nonsense. If I had any background, would I have such an expression? But it was clear that Zhou Lei's words had a hidden meaning. He coughed and said, Perhaps Brother Qin hasn't heard of my title as the Master of the Thunder Dominion. But I can guarantee that as long as you join the Thunder Dominion and become a cultivator under the Master, even a saint will have to be wary. Xianji humphed at Zhou Lei. He thought that honest people had really turned bad. In the blink of an eye, he had stolen away so quickly. Fellow Taoist Qin, my honorable master is half-sage, stacking iris. He is recognized by the outside world as one of the strongest half-sages. He is on good terms with many saints, and his connections are all top-notch. If fellow Taoist Qin is willing to enter my honorable master's tutelage, you will be able to guarantee your own safety. You're going too far. Even if you want to blow your own trumpet, you shouldn't be like this. Ruan Jing was all smiles. Brother Qin, Xiangzhang Academy is your best choice. There are 2 half-sages in my academy, and their style has always been to protect their own. As long as you are willing, I am willing to ask my senior apprentice brother headmaster to accept you as a disciple in place of my late teacher. In terms of seniority, those 2 just now will have to call you High Master. He had to pull Qin Yu into Xiangzhang Academy. At that time, if he could spend time with him, wouldn't he be able to learn a method to cultivate the space laws? He glared at Zhou Lei and Xianji, his eyes filled with contempt. One secluded himself in a corner, and the other only cared about transcending the mundane. Just what qualifications did they have to compete with his academy? Was it in terms of wealth or numbers? The sky-span sword cultivator suddenly opened his eyes. If fellow Taoist Qin is willing to enter the sword faction, I can guarantee you that. Ruan Jing was stunned. Damn, he had forgotten about the Heaven-Span Sword sect. When these sword maniacs fought over people, they were extremely fierce. Even the academy might not be able to stop them. Qin, you had an extremely formidable cultivation and also grasped the space laws. He was a fierce person that could even defeat a middle boundary spirit body. He was definitely worth winning over. The reason there was no movement before was because no one imagined that Qin Yu was a native that didn't even understand the space laws. It could even be said that he was one of the most formidable native cultivators in all of history. Fight, of course he had to fight. Even if he had to bleed, he had to fight. Qin Yu rubbed his chin, a bit uncomfortable. He had suddenly become a delicious cake in the eyes of these cultivators. Looking for a backer, yes, that was indeed the best choice he could make right now. But Xiangzhang Academy, the Heaven-Span Sword sect, the Thunder Dominion, and the ugly half-sage stacking iris weren't the choices he needed. If he wanted to latch onto a thigh, it would be best if it was the Peach Blossom Land. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.